Yo, this is Alex from Alpha Destiny, and today I'm bringing you a part 2 discussion with natural hypertrophy. The first one did extremely well, your feedback was absolutely incredible, and the natural community is stronger than ever before. So today, we're going to talk about training, a little bit of lifestyle stuff as well, and just get extremely specific. So stay tuned for another big round of information. So, how you doing today, NH?
Better than ever, right? With all of the stuff that happened in the past week, with the community coming together, I just feel like I'm being embraced and we're building something, and it just makes me want to work twice as hard.
That's what's up. We're building something real, and it finally shows how everybody came together for you. People that you didn't even think were following your stuff, but they showed lots of love, and look how fast you got your channel back. Like 24 hours later, boom, back in the game. And I could see that the fire has been ignited. You got this, your spirits are high, and you're just producing all kinds of content. And the people are loving it.
Yeah, it's in a sense, by killing the channel, YouTube gave me a big momentum boost because one, people realize that any channel can disappear at any point and that you should never take it for granted. And two, seeing the amount of love and the amount of work that people are willing to put in to get that information back made me realize that even I needed to make sure I never took it for granted. Our ability to talk to people is a privilege. We should always respect it. And the fact that we know now that the community has our back, regardless of what happens, is freeing in a sense. We know we're protected.
It's very reassuring because you can be yourself and not be afraid of judgment. So a lot of people will put on a front because they don't want to be censored or they're afraid of losing their audience. But if what you're speaking is your perspective and you're just being honest about it and people are open-minded enough to hear it, then it's all good because in the event where something bad does happen, they're going to come right back. So even someone like me, I mean, I would hope that I don't lose my channel, but I'm sure I can gain back tens of thousands of subs instantly if something like that were to happen because people value the information. And when that does happen, like you said, there was a boost in your channel. I'm seeing like double the views and people are really intense in the comment section, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, it's in a sense, it's as if we, the fitness community, were cancellation free. You know, it's a big fear of content creators to get canceled. But when you think about it, the people who cancel you are the people who watch you. It's not people from
Mm-hmm.
outside of the channel. They don't have that power. And because we do things like talk about our experiences, talk about our opinions, all of that, it does expose us to people that might disagree. But we've seen with that event that regardless of that, as long as we're all united towards one goal, and that is natural lifting, building people up, giving them information, that doesn't matter. There's not going to be people who are going to be willing to backstab you just because you might preach a different approach. It's all coming together and we're all lifters at the end of the day. And that's something I can appreciate.
Exactly. We're all preaching the natural way and we're on a mission of helping out as many people as possible. So because of that, given the fact that it's not self-centered, and especially with you, since your channel is not even monetized on top of that, and you're working even harder, it makes people really appreciate what you do. And they know that you don't have an agenda that's to mislead them or anything like that. So they're just gonna keep coming back for more.
And it's not just me too, it's something that I'm seeing more and more where you now know that there are people who are dedicated to helping you as much as they can, and it's not just to fill up their wallets, right? It's they might try to make a living out of it, and that's good for them if that's their job or what they need to be doing to put food on the table, but it's not the number one motive. And you see it across the board. It's refreshing to see videos put out and to be able to think, okay, this is not to sell me a product. This is not to push another gimmick on me or a training program. This is strictly to help me improve, and the guy gets absolutely nothing in return. This is where the best information comes from.
Right. It's cool to see people joining in together for information. What I've found over the years is that those who just make vlogs all the time and it's about me, 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 when they stop posting frequently, their channel goes down real fast. And then when they come back, they expect the same amount of viewers to come to return, but it doesn't happen. And they're always confused. They're like, I don't get it. I'm putting in all this work. And to me, behind the scenes, I'm looking at that person. I'm like, do you not see what's going on? In my lens, it couldn't be more obvious. It's because you're being completely self-centered. You're not trying to offer anything to your viewers. So it's about getting your own head out of your ass and offering something, putting others before you. And when you have that intention, that I'm just going to help you out. I don't care about me. I'm just a freaking messenger. This is my equipment. You can do what you want with it. You can work out in a similar way if you so choose to, but it's not mandatory. If this is a product I'm using, it's not because some guy is paying me money and I'm trying to shill it. It's because this is what it actually is. When the intentions are legit, you cannot post for months. Come back in and you're good to go. Look at Omar Isuf. Dude didn't post for like a year. Came back. Now he's getting like similar views to us because those 800,000 people benefited from his advice. He changed their life. He gave good information on strength training. No gimmicks, good programs, not trying to sell you. So with the right intentions, you know you're good. The community's got you back.
It's the power of integrity, because at the end of the day, I think Omar is a great example. It's an example I've taken in the past. I've been watching this dude for 10 years.
Yeah.
He has never tried to sell me anything. I have never gotten a snake vibe from him. I never felt like he's trying to manipulate me into doing things or to make me feel bad or to put himself on the pedestal. You will never catch that guy say stuff like, oh, I have amazing genetics and you
Never.
watching me, you have trash tier genetics. No, he's always uplifting. And people are not dumb. People can tell, people can sense it. And to your point with the vlogs, I do believe that vlogs are almost magical in the sense that they function like a spell. People who consume a ton of vlogs, they watch it every day and they don't realize that they're being caught in the routine of the guy who makes the vlog.
Yeah.
The only moment they realize it is when it stops. When the guy stops producing that content and they step back and they think, wow, why was I watching that stuff in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And when he does it again, that audience is not there anymore because they woke up from the dream. The guy still hasn't woken up. He's looking around like, where are my people? Well, they weren't your people. They were just guys that got suckered into your lifestyle on camera and then eventually, thank God, realized that it was a mistake.
It's being sucked into the parasocial relationship. Like this takes it to the next level. It's almost like when people watch a lot of TV and they think they're friends with the characters or an anime, you know? We can, of course, all relate to that stuff, but the vlog, as you said, it's a nonstop spell because they keep posting it. It's high frequent content and it's always in tune with what's going on in the community. But what's interesting is that the vlogs are a short-term thing. Unless someone is a super fan and they want to go back a few years, like what you did with Rich Piana, for example, right? But most of the time it's this one video, that's it. I'm never going to think about it again. It's on to the next vlog. And so are you really learning from that, or is it merely entertainment? But what I find is that these people, the viewers anyway, they almost seem like it's an obligation to watch it. And I don't know why that is, but it's like they'll skip even parts of the segment, right? And the little tidbits of training advice, they'll be like, yeah, good thing I watched this vlog. But in reality, they're not really getting much substance compared to someone who solely focuses on informative content. Like they're misallocating their resources, you know?
Yeah, but I have an answer to your question. The reason why they felt the need to consume it so fast is because it's fast food content and you know that it's going to expire because the vlog is only relevant for the day where it's posted, because then the next day there's another vlog. The guy is
Yeah,
up to another gimmick,
exactly.
something else. So if you skip, well, you're going to be left out of the group because the group watches every single vlog. So they're up to date. You're not up to date, you're out of the group, so you feel ostracized. In a sense, it's a good thing because the parasocial is not in full bloom or full power anymore, but you don't see it like this. And the guys who produce that, I'm certain, never actually think of that in these terms, but it's the reason why they manage to actually get all of these views is because it's essentially the equivalent of following someone, right? It's like the camera is what the audience can see through. So you feel like you're with a friend. For a lot of people, they don't realize it, but they feel their need for connections and social interactions via the vlogs, which is terrifying because it's not actually real. The guy is not your friend.
That's crazy, eh? And I think that's what people need to understand also about these influencers. Unfortunately, they're not your friend. I mean, they're some have amazing intentions and they're here to help you out. But at the end of the day, we're all acquaintances and we do have a community, but it's not like super personal unless you're constantly talking to the person one on one, or maybe you met them in real life, or you're, you genuinely interact a lot through DMs and stuff like that. Like I feel like there are some people that I've gotten to know better over the years, and it's crazy because I never thought that online I would get close with random people across the globe. You know, whether they be in the UK or in the United States. I'm just a guy in Montreal, Canada, and got all these people everywhere. So that aspect is awesome. But the average viewer is probably not gonna, get really tight like that with someone who has even more subs to say, because these people who do these vlogs, they don't have time to, actually a lot of them don't even respond to comments. The interaction, the one-on-one quote unquote, is the filming process. That's where they get personal, but they don't answer messages or emails or anything that actually resembles a human connection. And that's the difference.
Yeah, and it's because they're self-centered. And you pointed out to something interesting. It's true that you could also argue that what we're doing with the natural fitness community is the same. It's parasocial, but the difference is who benefits from it and where is the center of attention. You called it the me, and I think that's the perfect name. There are different types of content. There's the me content, where it's just talking about myself. Look at what I do in my day. Look at what I eat. Look at my life. Look at my cars. Look at my wealth. That is self-centered. It doesn't benefit anyone but the guy who makes the content and people who watch it for the parasocial. Then there is the us content. And I think that's where we come in, where we manage to make it about the viewer by talking about our own experience. That creates communities. It creates people that are interconnected that benefit from one another. You go on a vlog channel, it's a bunch of people that are part of a cult. They don't really have any connections with one another. Their only connection is the guy they watch.
You're
Like
right.
for our community, going to your comments or my comments, you'll see a bunch of people who discuss with one another. They're not looking up to us because we're among them. Right, we're part of the circle. They look to us, to the side, to the right, then they turn to the left to talk to a bro, to talk to a friend who's going to help them lift. We
Yep.
are never posed in a position of power. We dominate them, and it's important that we stay that way because it keeps us grounded and relevant.
That was perfectly stated, man. Like, I couldn't have said it any better. And it's so true that when you look at the comment section, just observe the top comments. Maybe we'll respond to a few of them, right? But when you see view all replies, it's gonna be like 10 plus. And it's not us going back and forth, it's them. They're interacting. And when we make a topic, that just introduces it. And then the rest is okay, have fun, guys.
Yeah,
Build amongst each other. And you know what? A lot of them end up becoming cool with each other. I had a guy who ended up meeting a girl in the comment section, and he thanked me after. I was like, yo, that's what's up, man.
that is great. And I can tell you that there are people on my channel that they will tell you that they use my channel as a bodybuilding page because they're like,
Like
bodybuilding
a forum.
forums are infested by PED users. I want a place where I can discuss natural bodybuilding, and this is your page. I'm not even part of the equation anymore. They're just discussing among themselves. They don't need me. My comment section is not my own. It's a space for it's a forum. Quite literally, what is a forum? It's a place where
Yeah.
citizens got to go to discuss topics, politics, the life of the city, etc. It's good that we can bring that back and bring that discussion back because, as you said, we share knowledge, but it's not ours. We give it to people, then they can do whatever they want with it.
Exactly. I love that we're able to bring it back in a modern context because let's keep it real. The newer generations don't really go on forums. That was the thing of way back. You go into Misc and all these little stupid things. Your average 16-year-old doesn't even know what that is. So they're not gonna. Obviously, we don't just have teenagers. There's a lot of adults as well, but they're not gonna go on a dead forum, especially if it's full of steroid users and people who give garbage advice. So at the end of the day, this is the modern expression. We got the video, it introduces, then we ask, what do you think of the topic, right? They give their feedback and then, okay, interact among each other. And it's beautiful to see.
Yeah. And it keeps the content relevant for years to come. I can tell you that sometimes I'm in the gym and I'm thinking about a topic and I'm like, okay, Alex in 2017 made a video about that. Let me go check
Mm,
that out. This doesn't happen on most fitness channels. Their content is one and done. You watch the content and you never touch it again because it loses relevance the second you watch it. It's
yep.
like the news. It's the constant news cycle. You're never going to go back to 1998 to look at what some guy said on Tuesday of that day. Why? Because it's non-stop. It's a flow of information that never stops. It's never connected to anything. So you can't think back to any of that. So it just disappears. It's posted and then it vanishes.
Yeah,
That's not what knowledge should be. We create libraries. It's what my subscribers said when the channel went down.
exactly.
They were like, it's like
The Library of
yeah,
Alexandria,
it's like a
exactly.
library burning down. But it's imagine if your channel went down, dude. Years of knowledge down the drain. It would be a tragedy. It's the reason why also people need to archive as much as they can.
Yeah,
But it's a proof that all of the videos we make, even the old ones, they have power. They can still help people years after the fact.
I 100% agree. And when I look at my own analytics, videos that I made years back ended up getting boosted by the algorithm. in 2021, even in 2022. Videos that had like 25,000 views, they're now up to over 100,000. And I didn't do anything. I didn't even promote them. It's just that those were relevant topics that people still want an answer to, right? They're valid no matter what age it is. If it's good information, that doesn't change anything, right? Especially if you put in a lot of effort into your videos, you know, in terms of thinking. Maybe the production value doesn't have to be the highest with the editing and all that, but if the substance is on point, you're always gonna have people going back. You know, 2016, 2017. Even when I look at channels like Fitness FAQs, that guy puts serious work into his videos. And when I go on his most popular, it's videos from like 3 years ago, but they surfaced after the fact, not during their creation. So if we talk about a business sense, that's passive income if you're monetizing it, right? Because it lasts forever. But on a social level, it's a library, like you pointed out.
Yeah, it's a book that can be opened at any point by any person. And the beauty of our craft, what we can benefit from as well, is that we're not limited by the technological aspect. As you pointed out, production value comes and goes. Like in 3 years, the camera that you use for your videos is going to be obsolete. You're going to have to
Exactly.
upgrade if you want a good camera picture. But does it mean that the videos you're going to make tomorrow or in 2 days are going to be obsolete? Not at all. It's just that the quality of the image is going to be slightly lower. People can
Yeah.
still learn from that. And there are many areas of film production that sadly suffer from that nowadays because people focus too much on the picture. We are lucky enough to have a community that, again, can go back 2 years, click on a video that's like, I know that when I started, I put my fingers on the lens of the camera, so it was always greasy. Like it's like I was recording in a sea of fog. You go in the comments, no one even mentions it. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I can hear your voice and sort of see your face. We good.
And I think that says a lot that when you're offering something that's legit, people are going to tune in. For example, your stuff is mostly talking based, but what makes it interesting is that your flow is on point. You're like a professor. You're able to construct one sentence after the next without breaking your thoughts. And it's honestly impressive, man, because I would have trouble doing it for that level of length. Like you can talk 3, 4 hours just nonstop, boom, 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 boom. Good grammar, good everything. And that's people like. The teaching methods have never gone out of style, is what I'm saying. And I look at myself years back. Sometimes I wonder, like, how the did my channel blow up by me talking in my room with like an old Nikon camera with a mic using my phone like this, you know?
I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what? Those were some of my most productive years because I wasn't afraid to put myself out there. People liked what I was offering, and we just kept it real. And then it eventually upgraded. Okay, got a bit more money, get some cameras. It's a natural evolution, but don't do nothing if you have a voice, you know?
It's the power of confidence that you develop as well. I mean, when I started, we weren't super confident like alpha chads that knew everything and were going to blow people's minds. We just turned the camera on and spoke. It's
Yep,
going to be shitty when you start. Like it's the
of
same with
course.
lifting. You start training, you're not going to be a beast right away. You have to accept that you're going to suck for a very long time. But it's part of the process. And I think it really is telling that so many people see that, people who are balanced and they look up to it and they think, okay, he did it, I can do it. You also see the opposite of people who get resentful or who are going to say that it's cringe or anything like that.
Last time I wanted to ask you about the male power fantasy, but we didn't get around to it. So I want to know, what is the importance of having those masculine role models that uplift you to that next level?
Well, first off, when people think about male power fantasies nowadays, it's mostly linked to fiction because that's most of what young men nowadays receive in terms of guidance, which is sad. It means that it's almost extinguished in the real world. But a male power fantasy in an ideal world would be your dad. That
Mm-hmm.
should be your number one male power fantasy. You should seek to resemble your dad because he exemplifies values that are relevant and that you look up to. Your grandpa, of course, your uncles, pretty much any male in your family that is someone that you would want to become. And it's
Yeah.
something that used to be a trope, right? There used to be true that young men would want to resemble their dads. They would even either have the same names as their dads, or they
Yep.
would do the same jobs as their dads. Fathers would pass down their jobs and their craftsmanship. Nowadays, we see the exact opposite. It's incredible the amount of friends that I have or the amount of people in my comment section that tell me that they detest their dads. Like they actively look down upon the person that fathered them. It's a sad state of affair, but it shows that at some point males started to degrade, and therefore the quality of examples that we had available was just not what it was supposed to be anymore. And it's interesting to see that we caught up to that. We were able to realize that, hey, this is not the way I should be acting. I shouldn't copy that individual because their life is not in order. So what happened is we turned to fiction, and that's where the male power fantasy archetype appeared. And for many people, for the other generations, it was movie stars or it was comic books. Comic book characters are big male power fantasies, and they're always built to be like your Supermans, your Batmans. It's always the same. It's a story of a guy who is above the rest, who has managed to transcend his mediocrity through efforts, through ingenuity, sometimes powers that are given to him, but he has other demons to fight, all of which are things that we as males also need to deal with in our lives. So these are examples that we can copy. And then it branched out. And for my generation in particular, it was mostly manga and anime. That's where we got most of the male power fantasy from.
Exactly. And I find it crazy that a lot of people don't look up to their dads or their grandfathers. I feel like there should at least be one person in your family that is just an absolute badass, and you have stories to tell. Like, yeah, like I remember when I was in elementary school and high school, people would brag, like, my dad is stronger than your dad.
Yeah.
No, and they would have little arguments about whose dad was better, and they would say, oh well, when my dad was 16, he bench pressed 225. And it was always this competition. Yeah, and I think that also plays a role in the black pilling that's been going on, because people don't believe in themselves because they never had a male power fantasy, and they never engage in activities that are perfectly normal for young boys to do. I find, like, when you have these inspirations, it almost brainwashes you into thinking you're unstoppable moving forward. It's a healthy, like, for example, a lot of us got into lifting because of Dragon Ball Z. We wanted to be muscular like Goku or Nappa or Raccoon or Broly or any of these characters. And it wasn't some bodybuilder. It wasn't Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's probably from our parents' time if they grew up in, the 60s or whatever. But us, it was literally the cartoons of these buff ass characters, and we want to be like that too. Even though, it's not possible to do some of these things in real life, I find that when you're a little boy absorbing that information, you see yourself as the character. And it just so happens that a lot of times they end up being the same age as you, like in like the anime character, and you grow with them. So like Dragon Ball, you're the same age as Goku when you're a little kid. Then Dragon Ball Z, you see him as an adult, and it's usually you watch it like incrementally, like week after week, once a week, and you're growing with the characters. And that makes
Yeah.
you want to do better.
And the shows, if you look at the shows, they're scheduled to be like this. Like when the character starts, Goku, for example, he's a kid.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. They want you to be able to identify with him and to grow with him. He doesn't go from kid Goku to like Super Saiyan 3 where he's massive with bulging biceps. He goes through stages. Adult Goku, young adult Goku, has a physique that's naturally achievable. Super Saiyan 1 might be a little bit over the top, but it's still something that resembles what a natural physique could look like to an extent. It gets overboard at some point because, of course, the power creeps up, and of course, you have to always do something more impressive to keep the audience captivated. Then you have Broly who walks in, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's not
Yeah, that's
possible.
like Big Ramy right there.
But as you said, even that it don't matter, right? Even if it's not possible. I remember being a kid and watching that movie, and when Broly appears on the screen, I was mesmerized because I was like, what? Like I was like, imagine if we could look like this. It would be so great. And of course it's not possible, but who cares? You're going to try, right? You're going to shoot for the moon and you'll reach the stars. So it's okay at the end of the day. And another thing important to bring up as well is that all of these that we watch all the time, all of these archetypes that we follow, as you say, they function like brainwashing. And a lot of people actually nowadays in the modern world point that out and say that it's toxic because it's forcing young boys to be what they are not supposed to be, right? To be more masculine, to be more aggressive. But at the end of the day, there is a reason why young boys actually like that type of stuff. It's the reason why we don't watch like Barbie dolls cartoons because we don't care about that. In our biology is ingrained the need and the will to become bigger and stronger. The cartoons just give that to us. They just feed that into us.
Just
It
fueling the
goes
fire, yeah.
inside. Yeah, and it's propaganda, but propaganda is neither good nor bad. It's what you make of it.
Yeah, and to say there's no propaganda these days would be false, you know? So it goes both ways. So if you're going to choose one direction, it might as well be the one that turns you into a badass,
Yeah,
if you ask me.
it's also the hypocrisy of the people who say that, right? We've all heard that when they point out toxic masculinity. We all know what it means. They're not looking out for our best interest. They're looking out for theirs because they think that if they manage to kill that evil, then it's going to make the world a better place where everyone is going to be happy. But at the end of the day, you have to keep in mind that they're just working for their own camp. It's their own agenda. It's not for you. You need to think about what is going to make you happy. And I can tell you that, and I'm sure that you reflect as well, and you can also identify to that mindset, that it's always better to seek strength. Trying
Yeah.
to remain weak and remaining weak is the choice of people who don't want to put in the work. It's not the proper way to develop oneself.
Yeah, I think Mark Bell always says strength is never a weakness.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's not just the physical strength, but the mindset that you get from developing your physique. That's why when you say treat your body like a temple, it's because natural bodybuilding, it's almost like a religion, not in the sense that you worship any individuals, but there's certain principles that you live by, or the noble natty commandments. There you go. Those are good things to do.
Yeah. And you say you don't worship anyone. That's technically incorrect. You worship yourself. And
True, true.
nowadays, people would say it's a bad thing because it's narcissistic. But you need to be able to love your body. And to love your body, you need to actually craft it into what you want it to be. A lot of people nowadays don't love themselves and they also struggle to love others. But that's why they felt that the number one thing, they have never actually worshipped themselves.
Yeah, it starts with self-love because if you don't have that, how can you offer it to anybody else? Or in general, like if you want to help others, you got to help yourself first.
In a sense, when you develop yourself, what you do is you accumulate strength. After
Yeah.
that, you can do with it what you want. If you want to bully people and dominate people and be an asshole, you get to. That's just an expression of your power. But what you'll find is that most men don't do that. Most men who accumulate that power use it after that to help others because now they're very comfortable so they can share. You can't share if you have nothing to share. And I have found that the most actual toxic, dangerous, black pilled, uh, disgusting males out there are the ones who lack that power and therefore they're
Mm-hmm.
resentful.
You're right. And you know how they talk about shaming, right? But what about muscle shaming? I find that's a big thing in this day and age. A man who's worked on himself, for one, if you cut out your ego, which actually is a problem for some individuals, but if you get rid of that, you're just going to want to help others become muscular as well. We have strength and then we give it back.
And it's the difference between pro and natural bodybuilding, in my opinion. You look at pro bodybuilding, it started especially with the icons of the 70s and 80s, where the center of attention was them. It was starting to just be all about them. Look at their body. If you look, and that's an exercise I want everyone to do. Go on Google Image and look up crowds of bodybuilding shows from the 70s and 80s. Look at the men in the crowd. They're all
Mm,
skinny. None of them trains, but look at their eyes when they look up at Arnold, for example. There's almost a level of love in their eyes. They admire something to the point that it becomes their entire life. But to me, it blows my mind that you could spend so much time looking at another man's body and not want to replicate that.
that's what
That's
I
when
don't
the
get.
male power fantasy dies. Like you watch
Yeah.
all of these cartoons because and it makes you want to get buffer. You're not going to just keep watching them until you're 45 and do nothing and just stay skinny. It's a fuel to go somewhere. But if you don't consume the fuel, what exactly is the point?
Even if one didn't have a certain level of inspiration, when you see something that's extraordinary in a natural lifter, it's like, oh, I kind of want to do that too. Even if that wasn't the initial motivation, it just propels you to that next level, you know? Again, using Dragon Ball as a reference, but we can reference any anime to be honest. When Goku became Super Saiyan 1, Vegeta wanted to do it really badly because he was
Yeah.
supposed to do it. He was the prince of all Saiyans. But this peasant who worked his way up managed to pull it off. And so when you see other naturals doing good, the mentality is not, oh, I'm just going to keep worshiping you. It's like, no, this is fucking awesome. I'm going to try to get on this level. And if I can't, well, so be it, but I'm at least try.
That's a killer point. Because if you look at what you just said, it's not just Vegeta, it's all of them. Right? He unlocked the
Yeah.
door for all of them. So what did he do? keep in mind, and I know you remember that in the show it's stated that the Super Saiyan is a legend, that it's
Yeah,
impossible to reach, and even Vegeta says that it's never been heard of and that no one will ever achieve that, and yet Goku does it. And what happens afterwards? They all do it because their self-limiting beliefs are removed by someone who never had any in the first place. Goku is always the first one to reach a new transformation. You'll see that as well. Why? Because he was removed from the planet of the science. He was never limited by their
it's
beliefs.
true.
He just did whatever. And therefore, by doing it, he opened the door for all of them. He, in a sense, removed their natural limits. And it's why also Dragon Ball Z is so great. None of these guys got resentful. You don't see, I don't know, Trunks saying, "Whoa, it's unfair that Goku has like Super Saiyan 3 and I don't. I'm sure that Goku is on PEDs." No, he saw that and thought, I'm going to do it as
Keep
well.
training harder, yeah.
If he could do it, why can't I do it? Right? It's also the reason why Goku being a peasant and not being of royal blood was so important, is because he was never gifted with anything special at birth. He
Yeah.
got it, and it motivated people around us. And to
And
go back on the topic of what you said, which I call swole shaming, when men are going to make fun of you for having muscles or wanting to be big or being strong, that shows something about them. It shows that they themselves are resentful. They see something that they want, but they know that it's tough, it's going to take years to develop, so they make fun of it because it's easier. It allows them to spare their ego in a sense. And that's the difference between winners and losers. Winners are going to see a big natural and think, I'm going to do it as well. If he could do it, why not me? And that is true 100% of the time. If someone can do it, you can do it as well. And then there are the losers who are going to say, well, you got it through illegitimate means, or you got lucky, you have good genetics. And all that it does is make their life worse. Because at the end of the day, you can swore shame us all you want. Like, I'm going home, I still have my muscles, I still have my
yeah,
confidence. They go home to nothing but their own self-pity and misery.
you raise a lot of interesting points there. So let me attempt to tackle them on. So on the swole shaming part, you're right. It's always projection. I've never seen any other exception to this point. Either the person is really skinny and they're trying to, maybe they want to be buff and that's why they're insulting you, or they're out of shape and they'll point to their big bloated gut and be like, oh, I'm good like this. I don't need a six pack. I don't need to eat strict like you. I'm good, right? But I think they're lying to themselves, especially when they get their blood work back. Then they got to take these meds and they feel like garbage, right? And it's funny how they always talk about other men's physiques, even though they also shame it at the same time, but I digress. So you're right. Whenever someone has negative to say, and I've seen this in the comment section over the years, it's always projection. I had a guy, when someone comments, there's the red thing. I made a video about gym rats. I don't know if you remember that one in 2017. And I mentioned how 225 is like a starting point of a bench press. You can go beyond that. It's not some mythical natty number that average people can't reach. And he was saying, no, you can't bench that much. Most gym bros are never going to do that. I again recently touched upon that same topic in one of my recent videos, and the same guy showed up, and he still can't bench 2 plates. And he got mad, and he wrote the same comment that he wrote in 2017. I was like, bro, this is projection.
And it's sad because you know that this guy spent 3 years, more than that even, just twiddling his thumbs. He didn't progress a
Yeah.
single inch in all of these years. He is literally wasting his life away. But he's always making sure to tune into your videos to listen to what you have to say. And that's what I just said with the people who love pro bodybuilding but never train. They lost the plot. The goal of following fitness influencers should be to grow your own body and knowledge, not to live through them. It's stupid.
Yeah. And going back to the Dragon Ball Z thing, it also can be connected to, the 4 minute mile or anything that's achieved. For example, you have teenagers now in powerlifting that are putting up numbers that only the elites in YouTube Fitness did like 10 years ago. Now everybody's doing it. So the standard is so high, and it's not because of PDs. It's not because we have a pool of genetic beasts coming out. Surely there is a factor to that, but it's really that one guy did it, and then another guy did it, and then, okay, maybe our expectations were a lot lower. Just maybe that in 2022, exercise science has come a long way. And you have guys that have been training for decades now, people that were under 20s back then, they're now under 50s, and they have some knowledge to offer you. Just, is it fucking possible that in the modern age, information improves and better information leads to better results? Is that not a thing? And that's what I don't get with these people. They're making excuses when we have the world at our fingertips. This is infinite intelligence. Never have we had such an opportunity before. And they're going to point at their genetics or what some weak ass gym bro who doesn't even follow YouTube Fitness is doing.
And it's shameful because look at the bodybuilders from 100 years ago. Look at their physiques. They had, of course, maybe, and that's maybe better quality foods, but with everything else, with information, with the ability to connect to other people, to learn from other people's mistakes, that was zero. So if they were able to achieve their physiques with that, it would be terrifying if we couldn't get to a better level and to even exceed that. Because I can tell you that when I look at these physiques from the past, pre-drugs, pre-steroids, I'm thinking to myself, yes, this looks good. We can do better.
We can do better.
I'm certain that the human limit is much further than that. And the beauty of powerlifting is that because it's objective numbers, it's right there in your face. It stares at you. You're like, yeah, I can tell for a fact that strength, global strength, is progressing and it's going along with global knowledge, because the knowledge that you accumulate, you're going to pass down to someone else. They're going to refine it. They're going to pass it down to someone else who is going to get bigger and bigger with each generation. That's how humans have always evolved. It's the passing down of knowledge that makes us the dominant species on this planet.
Exactly. The systems should be improving. And what you just said about looking at the old school bodybuilders, I've always felt the same way. So back then there were blogs and people would write articles on these people, right? That's how you would get your information because there was no videos on Steve Reeves or Eugene Sando or any of these people. And what I always found is that they would talk about how this is the pinnacle of natty achievements. And when I look at physiques like Eugene Sando, to me, his pecs were lagging. Good body, but his lats weren't as developed, his pecs. And when you look at the training, it reflected that because it wasn't focused on a lot of horizontal presses or weighted pull-ups and stuff like that. It was very specialized for strongman type of training, right? And Steve Reeves, phenomenal physique, but a lot of what he did was intentional. He was creating a certain level of symmetry, but not to say that that was his genetic potential for mass. So it's like, I look at these bodies, and as amazed as I still am to this day, most people would kill to look like Steve Reeves. I know that we can do better. And if I look at their strength, for example, if we know that strength and muscle hypertrophy are tightly correlated. Not that you have to train for strength or be a powerlifter, but if we know that you have to improve your performance. Like let's say you're doing 2 plates on your squats for 3 sets of 12, and you work up to doing 4 or 5 for sets of 12. If we look at those numbers back then, I mean, we can do a lot better. And by not even running strength training programs. So just off that, that should say a lot about where they were in terms of hitting their limit. They didn't even hit their limit. So if they didn't hit it back then, what makes anybody think that those physiques are like the best of the best? We can go a step beyond, if you ask me. And we've already done that with certain features of strength.
And it's fascinating also because if you look at these examples of back then, you will have people to tell you that one, they weren't natural, even though steroids or PEDs weren't even invented, which really goes to show the caliber of men that uses these examples or excuses that are intellectually dishonest, on top of being wimps, which is, it's not a combo that you want to find in a man. And on top of that, again, look at their physiques and think back to the fact also that all of them were relatively light compared to what we reach nowadays in terms of height plus weight. And you also come to realize that, yeah, some areas of the body were not as developed as they could have been because they were lacking the resources. Even the legs, they had good legs, but the legs, you can go beyond. The upper back, you can go beyond. We just got started. I think that the reason why so many people don't believe that is because pro bodybuilding is like a void. For the people who watch One Piece, it's like the void century where nothing happened for a very long time. And afterwards, now we're coming back with something that is real, that is realistic, with natural lifters. And a lot of people cannot compute that because we spent so long watching pro bodybuilders that deteriorated the methods that we employ, that it's strange to them because in reality, we went from Eugene Sando to now. All that existed in the middle was nothing from the invention of drugs to now. Yeah.
Bro, that's crazy. What you just said is so key. So there's been a time glitch in natural training. We went from old school, never reaching the potential of what that had to offer, directly into all-out drugs. This is what it is. And because of that long duration where nothing happened, it's only now, in the last 10 years or so, that we're finally starting to see some real natties kicking in. So it's the 21st century. That's the true golden age. It's not back then. For us.
For us, yeah. And it's a reality too that, in a sense, is not something that is nice to think about, because look at all the time that we wasted.
Yeah.
Look at all of these years where nothing happened. Imagine if drugs were never invented for a reason or another. Imagine if natural bodybuilding went from the 30s or 40s all the way to now, 70 years of natural training. What would be the standards of natural lifters?
It would be way higher.
Through the
Oh
roof.
my God.
Through the roof.
Wow. I wish we would have had that, but there's no point thinking about it. All we know is that there are some people coming out now that are the real deal, and we can look up to that. There's been a lot of inspirations over the years, but I remember when Eric Bugenhagen came out in like 2015, 2016, and showing the power of the mindset and demonstrating some of these feats of performance, people were freaking out. They're like, yo, is this even possible? And then we all started, doing similar things, and we realized that, yeah, it really is self-limiting beliefs that hold back what we're able to do. And it takes one person to do it, like we talked before with Dragon Ball Z. Even if you don't reach Super Saiyan 3, if you unlock fucking Kaioken, it's better than not having that, or Super Saiyan 1. Basically, we can look at other people for inspiration, but we're not them. They're just raising the bar. But more often than not, we can probably get pretty close to what they're doing, or at least do something that we never would have done otherwise. And that's the distinction, and that's why we gotta keep raising the community as a whole, because we're all capable of so much more.
I think using Bugenhagen is a very good example, because it's true that he brings something that wasn't really seen. And what you just said is that he pretty much broke limits that people had imposed on themselves, and they didn't realize that it was just their imagination at the end of the day. And that's the reason why also the meme of the mindset is more profound than many people actually want to believe, because it's limited to a guy who gets red in the face and screams and he lifts tons of weights. That's not that. I think that the most important message that Eric was starting to spread on the platform is that you have to put your mind to it, but you also have to do it for a very long time. Like, he has been doing his crazy shtick, quote unquote, for years and years, even before YouTube. He didn't do that for the camera. What he promotes is the frequency and the consistency aspect of lifting. He found his own way to make it palatable for him and to stay passionate with his crazy 1 rep maxes. But there is a lesson in that, and the lesson is that anyone can do it. Anyone can find a way to train for a very long time. I think he's been training for 20 years now, like 20
Probably,
years
yeah.
of non-stop training. No one on YouTube Fitness can say the same. Almost no one. And it's the reason why also he has results, and he has even a physique that most people look as supernatural, because he has gone through a supernatural amount of training. In a sense, to go back to Dragon Ball Z, because it's like the metaphor of this episode, he went into the time capsule. Right, literally, he has spent so much time training that it's only natural he would get results. And I think it truly shows also that most people are black pilled, because they think that the amount of years you spend training has no relevancy. It doesn't mean anything. Most people think that you train for 3-4 years and then all of the years after that are for nothing, just to maintain. That's not true. Bugenhagen is a sign of that. The more years you put in, the bigger and the stronger you get as a natural, to the point where you're going to get crazy results, to the point that his natty status is questioned all the time, because he's something that we've never seen. Now, is he natural? I don't know. I don't live with him, right? I don't take morning coffee with him. I don't check on him on the bathroom. What I can say, however, is that the people who accuse him of taking drugs are noobs. They don't have enough information or training knowledge to be able to make that type of call. And they would be surprised the result they would get if they would also themselves apply the same mindset, just get to it and train. That's what he always wanted. And that's what naturals need, to get back to the root. The root is training.
Yeah. And even if people, for example, say that he may not be natty now, if looking at his previous performance, what are you going to say about those numbers? Because they were out of this world, and so was his physique. Like his best was a 900 trap bar back in the day. And you know what? When I first saw that, I was like, fuck, is this even possible? And I remember when I got 700 the first time. And then a few years later, I did 700 again, but it was so much easier. And now I might be good for 750-ish. So looking at that 900, obviously we got different leverages and all that, and he's bigger and more muscular, but is it impossible to hit? I don't think so. You know, as crazy as that may sound, once you understand that it's just a matter of time, like that's all it is. You understand that the natural limit, it doesn't exist, but your enemy is time. It's both your friend and your enemy, because that's what's going to get you in the end. You know, are you willing to stay consistent for the next 20 years? And actually, Bald Omni Man had a really good example. I believe it was him who said, if I gain half a pound of muscle a year, over the next 10 years, that's going to be 5 pounds of muscle. I'll take that. Over 20 years, that's 10 pounds of muscle. So let's say you put 20 to 30 pounds of muscle in a normal time frame, and then you add plus 20 years for another 10 pounds of muscle. You don't think you're going to look that much better? Like, I don't think people understand how much lean tissue that is and what that would reflect in your performance. Like, you got powerlifters doing hypertrophy blocks that last like 3 months. And when they go back to the heavy lifting, their performance goes up. So even minuscule amounts of muscle will improve your performance. So what's 10, 20 years of lean tissue going to do to your 1 rep max, for example?
Yeah, it puts you over the top, and it's what makes you look phenomenal. A lot of people get their newbie gains. They get their like 80%, and they'll say stuff, and I've heard people say that. They'll say stuff like, well, I got my 80%, so what is the point of continuing, right? I got most of it. Well, yeah, but it's still a 20% you're leaving on the table, and that 20% is the difference between very advanced natural lifters and the rest. Anyone can get those 80%, right? The winners, the guys who are going to look tremendous, are the ones who fought for that 20% remaining and more.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I think it goes to the topic of muscle maturity. A lot of people have had difficulties quantifying it over the years. But what I really think at this point, this is only a speculation, maybe it's just those extra little pounds of muscle that fill out your frame and give you that tighter, swoller look. Because even like you can't spot reduce fat, but a bigger muscle will make the fat distribute through a larger surface area. So even that in itself can make you look a little bit leaner at the same weight.
Power of time, and the power of also of understanding that it might not always be a linear progression. It might not be staring you in the face, but progress is progress. Your example of the trap bar is exactly that. You said that you used to do 700 and it was a struggle. Then 700 was easy and now you're above 700. What does that mean? Does it mean that you stagnated? No, your strength went up, your potential for power went up. Maybe that means that the progression, the maturity that you just described is what kicked in, is the fact that you got overall stronger. What used to be tough is now easy. And that is the sign of one thing and one thing only: muscle gains. It's not the magical connection of your cerebrum cortex that improved, it's muscle.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people always try to downplay that. They're like, oh, it's all neurological. You can only do so much with technique work and being specific like that. At some point, you got to put on some more lean tissue. And, you know, show me a guy in one of my top comments, Dominic DNO. I believe he's natural. He's been training for the last 20 years, and he's approaching a 500-pound bench press. And when he was 30, he had like a 405 bench press. So from 30 to 40 years old, he entered the 400s. If you look at his physique at 30, I fucking promise you, anyone will look at him and say he hit his natural limit. Anybody. Because he looked like a bit more muscular than you and me, you know? But look 10 years later. And he's been doing the same exercises for the most part, focusing on the basics, just getting progressively stronger on bodybuilding rep ranges. He says you do multiple sets of 10 on a four plate back squat. Show me a guy who has small quads. So when you see these skinny people putting up extreme numbers, for one, they probably have good leverages for some of those lifts. And two, those people could still get bigger. So it's just representing relative strength according to them. But on an absolute scale, everyone who gains tremendous amounts of performance is going to be bigger. You know, if we're talking about the actual muscle tissue, including those guys.
And the standards for strength also need to reflect the special, inclination of the individual. Because, for example, someone could get to a 2-plate overhead press and not have massive shoulders. It's fairly possible. Someone else could get to the same benchmark and look like a monster. It's all
Exactly.
dependent on leverages. People need to understand that as well. You need to always look for progression, not necessarily absolute strength or strength that someone else told you is the number you need to hit. Hit what you need to hit to gain more muscle mass. That is going to increase throughout the years. There's no way around that.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, like, I'll see some people in the comment section. They're like, "Well, Alex, I don't bench press as much as you, but our pecs and triceps are pretty much the same size. So, are you saying I should shoot for more performance?" And I'm like, first of all, that's great. I'm happy for you that you don't have to be as strong. Because if you're not a strength athlete and you don't care about your numbers, it doesn't matter. You're just using that as a way of gauging your progress. That's all it is. When guys like you and me talk about progressive overload for natural bodybuilders, it's only a marker. So everyone's going to build differently, but at the end of the day, we still have to follow the same steps. And if someone can get massive legs squatting the 300s, more power to them. But if a skinny guy gets there training like a bodybuilder, well, obviously he's going to have to raise his numbers that much more. So that's why, like you said, it's not about the absolute numbers. It's about individualized progression. I think that's what everybody missed when they started comparing themselves to powerlifters and those skinny guys.
And I know that guys like you who are preaching that message of getting stronger were getting, in a sense, misunderstood by many. Not necessarily
Greatly.
because the message wasn't clear, but because the mindset of the people wasn't. The environment wasn't. It was too powerlifting centric. So when you spoke about strength, people thought about strength in relation to powerlifting, meaning that they thought of it as something that needs to be utilized to be tested and to gain prizes or to win at competitions. But that was never the point. The point was to push for progression always.
Yeah.
And to go back to the example of someone who would be skinny and be very, very strong, it might also very well be that this person has a program that's more skewed towards strength. And now we get into the discussion that confuses the heck out of YouTube Fitness of size versus strength. You
Let's
can
do
click
it.
on any of these videos with millions of views sometimes and listen to the guy, and you quickly realize one thing. They either do one of two things. They either say that size and strength have nothing to do with one another, and that is usually pro bodybuilders who say that,
Mm.
or they'll say that it's the exact same thing. You see a total lack of nuance. It's either they just conflate the two concepts, or they separate them to the point that they pretend that they have nothing in common. That's not true. You are going to use strength regardless of if you train for size or strength, because strength is what you do, it's what you put in. Anyone who lifts is strong and is demonstrating a certain amount of strength. You do 2 push-ups, that's quantifiable. It's 2 push-ups. It's your 2 push-ups strong. It's that number that needs to be taken into account. But after that, the goal is, am I training just to have a higher number, or am I trying to push the number up to have bigger muscles? This is what the
Exactly.
difference is. And then we can get into the topic of how to program for size and strength, which is, again, a different discussion, but not one that should lead to an absolutist answer. Because, yes, bodybuilders need to improve their strength, but never for strength's sake.
Not for strength's sake. That's the important point. I wanted to ask you then, because I've heard you say in some of your videos that you don't care about strength. Um, can you clarify a little bit more what you mean by that? Like, do you literally not care at all? Like, the numbers don't mean anything? It's
So,
just a tool?
so for me, it's that. It's just a tool. And I wasn't always like this. When I started lifting, I was fanboying for powerlifters in a sense, because all of my favorite YouTubers were powerlifters. So I was training exactly like them. And I was seeing good results, don't get me wrong. But I quickly got to a point where I was plateauing, not in strength, but in mindset, where I wasn't seeing where I was going. I remember hitting a 3-plate bench, a 5-plate deadlift, and a 4-plate squat and thinking, okay, this is apparently the holy land. I made it, but I felt nothing inside. I felt
Mm-hmm.
void. There's no happiness here. So what do? Well, I tried to do what I was told to do, which is just get stronger. So I got a 335 bench, a higher squat, and all of that again was leading me nowhere because I was no powerlifter. I wasn't willing to
Right.
compete, and strength in itself wasn't able to actually make me happy. What made me happy was size. But I fell into the trap that many young lifters fall into as well, is to just tunnel vision on strength. And so I bulked up and I got fatter and fatter. And the fatter I got, the less of an appealing physique I had, the sadder I became. But what saved me paradoxically from this toxic mindset was injuries. I got some severe injuries back to back, and it forced me to reconsider.
Okay. And what were those injuries?
So I got a ton because I was truly training like an idiot. That's what happens
Okay.
when you train for strength, but without strength as a goal, where you just accumulate strength and you get stronger just for the heck of it, just to be able to say, I have more plates on the bar, right? A lot of people have this mindset where they train for strength, but they don't know why. There's no application of it. I was exactly like that type. And it got me to a point where I got a severe rib injury, where I shattered my ribs squatting. And it broke the ribs, it sprained the intercostal muscle, and
Mm.
it was to a level where I couldn't do any squat, I couldn't do any deadlifts, any pressure on the ribs was just excruciating pain, and it forced me to one, lose weight because it was weighing on the ribs and it was killing my
Wow.
recovery, and also to think. I couldn't lift, so I had time to think for once in my life and reconsider and think, why am I doing this? Why am I going into the gym? What is my true calling in this? Is it strength? No, it's not. Strength is not my passion. It's just the reason why I say I don't care about strength. When you don't care about something, it means that your feelings aren't attached. There's no emotions. I love watching people lift heavy weights. I love strongmen, but all of that is a spectacle. It's not what I want to do. What makes me happy is bodybuilding. It's what I always loved. It's seeing the body evolve. And sure, strength is going to evolve with it, but it's a byproduct. I don't really care. A PR to me means nothing. A new vein or a certain definition or a new shine on my muscle to a certain angle, that's what matters to me. But the only way to get that is strength. So you can't separate the two.
Exactly. And that's why people get confused with the intentions. They don't know what's going on in your brain. And so when you don't conform to their ideologies of competing in a powerlifting meet or doing a one max, they're like, but why? You're a pretty strong guy, but now you're like contradicting yourself. But it's not a contradiction. You had to reach a certain point in your life where you finally understood, yeah, I don't give a fuck about this. And I feel like those who try to say that you're coping, again, it's projection, and because they didn't hit that point yet. But I promise that they will. At some point, we all realize what we really want. We go through something. And the example I can give you recently was when I got shredded. I realized I do not want to be like this. I'm glad I got there. And now there could be no mistake. Moving forward, I know for an absolute fact I don't want to be single digit year round, even if I could do it. Because I know what it takes to get to that point, but there's no attachment, there's no emotions. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to look at some shredded calisthenics guy and not be impressed. So that's the difference between, respecting someone versus doing the same thing. And in this natural community, we all walk different paths. We all have different training philosophies, and it's good to learn from each other and keep strengthening that. But it's not a hive where we all got to be one to one. Like you and I have some conflicting views on training for some stuff. We agree on 90% of things, if you ask me, but there's that 10% where there's always going to be disagreement. Or you'll have guys that, um, have the opposite goal from you, but you still respect them like really hard. Like I think Bald Omni Man, for example, he's more so seeking strength and hypertrophy is the side effect. Whereas you, it's the opposite way around. But in the comment section, it's tight as hell, and you guys talk back and forth, and it's a beautiful thing. So there's never any hate towards anyone. It's just like we get to that point after lifting long enough where it's like, I don't want this, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think when we finally go back to individual needs, that's when everybody's gonna be much happier.
True, and thank you for bringing that up. I think it's important to clear the air now before people start to artificially create drama. There's
Yeah,
no drama, right? That's what I say all the time. Powerlifters are my brothers. People who love strength are my brothers. We're still lifters. It's
yeah,
just that we don't follow the same path, and that's perfectly okay. I'm truly tired of this word where apparently we're all supposed to be the same, or else there is division. No, that's not true. True diversity is diversity of thoughts, and that's what we
yeah,
offer on YouTube Fitness. And I agree with you. We share 90% of training information and of dietary information. 90%. The 10% remaining are the intention. Where are these 90% directed towards? What do we want? You're a guy who is going to say and state that you have a love for strength. You have a passion for strength. And that
yeah,
doesn't mean that you're a powerlifter, by the way.
yeah.
Powerlifting doesn't have the monopoly on strength. You can be a
Exactly.
strength athlete, you can be strength oriented and not want to compete in powerlifting. It's perfectly acceptable. And it also means that at the end of the day, you're going to give information that I don't possess, that people cannot find on my channel. And Board Omni-Man is the same.
Yeah.
It's the reason why when people come to me for strength advice, I tell them, look, I'm not the guy. Go seek your guy. We're all in our own lanes and we're trying to do our best to give you advice. Anyone who would want that type of advice can go to you. They can go to Board Omni-Man. If they want something more generalistic, they can listen to any of us because, as you say, it's going to work. Your advice will work for bodybuilding. But if I had to send a trainee to either your page or one of these pro bodybuilders or like fake natties, who would I pick? It's a no-brainer. I would pick you 10 times out of 10. But then if they realize one day, wow, what I really want is bodybuilding. What I really want is to like scope down and narrow down.
Full
Well,
on,
at
yeah.
that moment, I'll tell them, okay, come on board. That's what I do. But if they wake up and they say, no, what I want is strength, I'll bid them goodbye. I cannot help you further on that path. But you made a good point. It's okay to realize that the path wasn't the correct one at the end of the tunnel. I realized that. You realized that. We made our mistakes, but we turned back. It's not a waste of time. It's experience accumulated.
Exactly.
What would be great, however, is if we could help people not make that same mistake and have them think of intentions. Start thinking about why you're doing things early on, because that way you're going to actually do them properly.
Yeah. And I think that we could make people not repeat those mistakes by just being honest about our experiences, not sugarcoating it, not trying to be macho or misrepresenting what we went through. Let's just keep it real. Be open, and the term is not submissive, but what's that word I'm looking
Vulnerable.
for? There you go. Be vulnerable about your lifting experiences. And that's when you're going to get some real connections and save people from going down a path that they probably shouldn't have gone through in the first place. And like you said about true diversity, that's exactly what it is. It's not forcing everyone to be the same, because then that's fake. It's knowing that we have certain conflicting views, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Overall, I would say that the natural community is pretty similar, even if we have those ideas that don't really align, and we all got our specialties. Of course, we borrow certain concepts from a certain field, but it's not ours. And the advice, like, it is different. For example, one of the things I wanted to ask you in your powerlifting video, how does one develop their arms without powerlifting strategies? Because you're going to hear these guys say, just raise your close grip bench press. And a lot of us who've tried that have found out that you can't do that exclusively. And actually, 2 days ago, there was a research paper that came out, and guess what it showed? It was comparing only triceps to bench only, and then bench plus triceps. What gave the best results? Bench plus triceps. You have to isolate your arms if you want the biggest size possible. And the same is extended to biceps. You can't just do chin-ups. So I find that all these people who focus purely on performance, if they're not talking about the accessories that you could do to correct that lagging muscle, then they're lying. Or they have such good genetics that they can get away with it. Because I remember years back, I had people say, Alex, the reason why your biceps aren't mountainous is because 3 plates, okay, hear me out now. 3 plates on the weighted chin up is not enough. You gotta get 4. They said that shit to me. So what did I do? I got 4 plates. Just my lats got bigger.
It's the moving of the goalpost. And it's what I said in the powerlifting video is I don't resent powerlifters per se, but I resent the dogmatic mindset that they pushed on the platform that is still prevalent in many people's minds, where they have been told, if you want to get bigger, just get stronger. So they tried. They got very strong and they're still not big or not where they want to be. So where is the next logical step going to take them? Get even stronger. But it's absurd. At some point you realize that. And what you say, the example I have seen with my own 2 eyes as well. People who say, oh, you want a big back? Just deadlift 700 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, sure, I'm just going to wake up one day and do that.
Sounds great.
Right? And on top of that, it's insulting for powerlifters because it presents their sport as just an afterthought, as a joke. Like anyone can do it. It's presenting strength as something you can just get on the side to achieve size, but it's never going to be the case. And those numbers are completely unrealistic, as you said. You want big biceps? Get a 4-plate chin-up. Sure, get a world record hit lift. That's super doable. Most people can't do that. And there are freaks of nature out there that can get massive triceps with just close grip bench. I'm sure of that. But when these same people start saying that it applies to everyone, that's when it becomes a mistake, because that's not true. Everyone can grow big triceps if they isolate the muscle. And with the study you just cited, the results are not shocking to anyone with a brain. It should be logical that isolation is going to produce good results in the muscle that is isolated. Of course, you don't want to shun the compounds, but you also want to have a lift that is dedicated to that area in particular. And it's something that I try to push on the channel. I try to push that basic level of logic. You want to grow a muscle? Okay, target it. That should go without saying.
It's the most common sense thing you could possibly think of. And there's a reason why every natural bodybuilder in the history of natural bodybuilding has isolated their arms. I can't think of any of them that didn't do this. Not one. So the people who say you can get massive without isolating, notice how they're not bodybuilders. Never. They're always calisthenics athletes or powerlifters or just recreational lifters. They haven't coached other people who have actual lagging muscles, who've been through some of these pitfalls. The skinny novices who ran starting strength and ended up with toothpick arms at the end, they haven't looked at those people. They're just looking at themselves, who responded well, and then they apply that to everyone else. And if they're influencers, it makes things worse, because then other people will start to copy that content and just recite it. Because let's keep it real, a lot of people, that's what they do.
Yeah, and it creates survivor bias, because at the end of the day, if you say that just chin-ups is enough for biceps, that is true for you, and it might be true for a select numbers of people who are going to hear it. So what happens afterwards? These people testify, and they'll say, oh, you're right, it worked for me. But you'll never hear the rest, because the rest are ashamed. It didn't work for them. So they might even start to believe they're the minority, and they'll think, oh, it's just that I'm not good enough, it didn't work for me. But if I look at the testimonies, it worked for everyone else. So
Exactly.
it's not that the method is bad, it's that I am bad. And that is simply not true. And to also explain the reason why that mindset is prevalent, as you said, it's because the people who spout that type of nonsense are powerlifters, meaning that their size is not their pursuit. Performance is their pursuit. They just so happen to manage to marry performance and size. I've seen a guy do that recently where there was a video about someone saying that curls did nothing for biceps and ring movements were the best thing ever. And his logic was that people who work on rings have big biceps. And actually, we spoke about that last time. And we said it. Yeah, it's true. Rings will grow your biceps. But the issue is that telling people to only do rings for biceps, now that's a problem, because the guys who have the bulging biceps who do rings are world record holders. They're top performers.
Exactly.
And you will not get to that level of performance. And even if you could, why would you invest 15 years of your life and hard work just to get big biceps when you could get the similar type of result with 5 years of progressive overload on curls? It's the reason why, and I'll end on that, I don't like these people, because they make a mockery out of strength. They pretend that just about anyone can have the dedication to get to that level just to get size.
Yeah, the solution is always be an elite strength athlete. And to get on that level to begin with, you're probably not going to run only bodybuilding programs. Like if the advice was, okay, NH, you want 19-inch arms, you're going to have to get a 405 close grip bench. I don't think you're going to do it with just evolving rep ranges, to be honest. I think you're going to work in some higher percentages and periodize your program. It's going to look a lot different. So proportionally, you might gain some additional strength that's not in relation to what you would have normally gained on a standard hypertrophy program. Basically, you're skewing the ratio a little bit. So even then, it's kind of flawed, right? And you're right that it's like, for biceps, just become a professional gymnast. Learn all these psychotic moves that 99% of fitness influencers still can't do. You know, I can't do them, and I have pretty good leverages. I have short arms. I have hypermobile elbows. I could do 4 plates on the way to chin. I can't do that shit, you know? And for me to learn that, it was going to take me another 5 years, probably. When a more efficient route would be training like bodybuilder. And what's interesting with these examples is that they'll cite a few gymnasts, like 5 gymnasts who have big biceps. And I'm all for it, okay? I love rings. But then they won't cite the 100 natural bodybuilders that have bigger biceps than those gymnasts who only did curls. So you tell me, at the end of the day, what's the most logical, efficient route? And also, I think it's important to borrow from these disciplines, but not necessarily go to the extreme level. So if I want to use rings to grow my biceps, it's very simple. I'm going to do 2 exercises. A pelican curl, where the rings are coming behind me so I get the weight of stretch on the bis, and a ring curl, either 2 arms at a time or 1 arm at a time. And if it becomes too easy, I'm going to wear a weight vest. Done. That's as far as it goes. I'm getting all the benefits I need. I don't have to do all these advanced moves.
There is actually an interview from GSP, your co-citizen, that is strikingly accurate and represents what we were just discussing. Actually, it's an interview with his coach back when he was competing in MMA, where the guy was saying, it was Firas Al-Zahri, I think, who was saying that he had Georges St-Pierre on an Olympic, not an Olympic, a gymnastic program. So he had the guy who trains for fighting do gymnastics. And what he said is that he made sure to keep him at the lowest level possible. Not because he didn't think that Georges St-Pierre had the ability to develop in gymnastics, he had, but simply that the investment it would take to get to a very high level as an athlete in that sport would take away from the sport of MMA, because you only have so much points to invest in things. And so it's the same logic we have to apply here. You cannot tell someone who wants to look good to just get very good at strength and powerlifting, because then the strength stats and size here still remains dormant. So best case scenario, they got some size from the strength, so they're here, but they could just have done this instead. Size here and strength here. Prioritize. And that is the difference, again, between strength and size. It's the way you program and the way you approach it. You pointed it out. Someone who wants to grow their bench, if they follow my method of evolving rep ranges, they're shooting themselves in the foot. Evolving rep ranges are scheduled towards hypertrophy. They make you retake weights that are very challenging, but they sabotage progression on purpose because they accumulate more volume, but they don't help in terms of actually putting weight on the bar. It's much slower to progress on something like a 4 to 8 than something like a 3x5. It's just logical. But it takes the ability to actually understand why and to also know which one you prefer. Which one do you want more? Do you want to grow your strength stat or your size stat? Knowing that they're both going to grow at the same time, but one is going to grow more than the other. And you have to make that sacrifice, because at the end of the day, lifting is about choices.
Yeah. And I know back in the day, I didn't understand this nuance. And that's probably because of the powerlifting bias that was prevalent at the time. But I literally thought it was like 100% 1-to-1, that any strength work is equivalent to hypertrophy work. And I now believe that is not the case because of the fact that strength is a skill to a certain extent. Like if you're doing a lot of singles, you're going to get better at that. And even I know that Johnny Candido made a video about effective reps. Like you can train at a much lower RPE and still get, like, you're becoming more technically proficient at those lifts, and that in itself is going to improve your performance in the long run. You're getting so dialed in, right? So the things you could do besides increasing your muscle tissue that will make you a better power lifter. And specificity of training goes in any direction. So it's like you said about the skill. It's not that we're separating them. That's physically not possible. And even in your case with evolving rep ranges, it might take longer to like max out those top reps, but once you get there, the hypertrophy results is going to be the same as the guy who did the more strength focused approach. But the difference now is the guy who only did strength will have a higher level of performance. So his ratio is going to be different. So there is research confirming this too. You can lower the reps down to 5. And as long as you're getting really close to failure, between 0 and 3 reps in reserve, you're going to get big. But you can't tell me that someone who's doing like a 3x5, you can't tell me that his performance is going to be the same as someone who does 3 sets of 20 to failure. They're both going to have muscles, but there are specific adaptations to performance that take place, as well as just learning the movement patterns. So when you run a powerlifting program, you get really good at doing those lifts, and that in itself can, affect things.
And that technique aspect is also relevant for bodybuilders, as you said, because at the end of the day, we all lift. So being good and proficient at doing squat is a good skill to have for both powerlifters and bodybuilders. But then powerlifters are going to scope down. They're going to refine that because they want to be excellent. Bodybuilders don't need to be excellent. You're not going to do one rep maxes. You don't need to be able to squeeze out 100% of the power every single time. And this is when a bunch of stuff like, for example, speed reps. Speed reps are excellent for powerlifting because they serve that purpose. But for bodybuilding, what is the point of doing a rep of deadlift or squat at 40%? It's called, for a bodybuilder, it's called a warm up. It's not relevant tonnage. And yet, you will see people espouse these notions because they don't quite understand why they're doing it in the first place. I recently made a video about deloads. Deloads is a big portion of powerlifting centric knowledge that I'm trying to help people revamp in their minds, because I still have a lot of guys on my channel who train for bodybuilding. They send me their programs and I see a massive block of deload every 6 weeks. And I tell them, guys, what is coming after this? What do you do after the deload? And they tell me, well, I just start the training again. Well, then you're missing the point. A powerlifter would deload to peak. You're not peaking, so you're sacrificing a week of training for nothing at the end. So this is something that works for powerlifters, but for bodybuilders, we need new knowledge, and that new knowledge is the continuation of what the bodybuilders of the 20s, 30s were doing, that pro bodybuilders ignored entirely because they didn't need to think about it to get big muscles, and we just pick up from there. Like, we just took down notebook and we're starting to finish the work that was never really finished.
Yeah, we're finishing their work. And on the point of the deloads, I think what would cause someone to take them more frequently is the percentage of your one rep max being too high. Because that's what my experience has shown me. And it's what you see with a lot of these advanced powerlifting programs. You know, the peaking process itself, typically speaking, you're going to increase intensity and lower volume. So by the time you get to the end of that phase, your fatigue is so high that you really have no choice but to deload. And if you're running like a more conjugate type of setup, like with what I do, the max effort training in itself is going to catch up if you're doing it all the time, right? Especially if it's twice a week. So I found that when I was doing 100 maxes on the bench 2 times every week, I had to deload at least every 4 to 6 weeks, because if I didn't do that, I wasn't even able to perform on my hypertrophy work. But if someone is always in the, let's say, 65 to 75% range of your 1 rep max, you know, and you're leaving like 1 to 3 reps in reserve, your fatigue shouldn't accumulate rapidly. It should take a really long time. So the need for a deload goes down. And in many cases, it's just going to happen naturally. Though I would say, in my opinion, I still think it's beneficial just for dropping overall fatigue. But I do understand that when you're not lifting heavy like that, it's really not as important as some of these strength athletes would make it out to be.
Well, we're going to just go back on what you said, because
Yeah,
what you said was very interesting, right? There are still portions of the information that you share that, because it's tailored towards your needs, might confuse people. So I just want to just correct them
sure.
for a quick sec. So you said that you would get similar hypertrophic benefits from one program to the other, but that one of them might have a higher potential for strength development. I disagree with that. I think that it's possible to get higher strength development from a program, but I don't believe that this very method will result in as much hypertrophic benefit as you would have if you had went a pure bodybuilding route. For example, let's take your current training or the training that you described just now. You do
Sure.
1 rep maxes
Yeah.
because you want to peak, you want to perform, you want to have a stronger, higher bench. But you want that to be able to prove to yourself and to anyone that is involved in this that you can get a higher bench, that you can get a four plates, even higher than 4 plates. That is your love of strength that is being presented to your subscribers. But the thing is that this doesn't necessarily correlate with better hypertrophic benefits for you.
Oh, of
If
course
you
not.
if you shaved off those 1 rep maxes, as you said, they take a tremendous amount of work and it fatigues the body a lot. But look at the tonnage you get, because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, 1 rep max is still 1 rep. You could have
Yeah.
gotten better hypertrophic benefits with more reps, less fatigue, better recovery, and therefore no deloads. You needed the deload because your goal is both size and strength.
Yeah. The only thing with that is you're right that I would take less deloads, but the 1 rep max is just an introduction and it's very fast, you know? So that's literally like when people see that, especially on Instagram, you post your top single, they think that this is the major feature, but really it's the least important part. And that's another misconception, right? Like you work up, you do 3 attempts, and then you got a lot more shit to do, like a lot more. But obviously you don't need it if your goal is just hypertrophy. You scrap it out, and now you can go directly into your volume work, and you're gonna be fine. It makes sense why a bodybuilder wouldn't have to prioritize that as much in that context. But
But it's just because at the end of the day, it's still a concept that I apply in my training. I program what I call strength hook, and strength hook is just what you described. It's what opens the program. It's the toughest lift with the highest intensity that gives you the highest quality tonnage. But as you described, it's the start. Like you open with that. What follows it, what makes sense. The difference between you and I is that my strength hook is going to be 3 sets of 4 to 8. Your strength hook is going to be 3 singles.
yeah,
That is the difference.
yeah.
What
No,
follows
100%.
afterwards is going to look almost the same between you and I. The difference is the strength hook. You want
Yeah,
strength. When I do strength hook, it's only for progression, performance, and hypertrophy at the end of the day.
yeah, I agree, for sure, man. And when you do like 3 sets of 4 to 8, like that's obviously going to give you better tonnage for hypertrophy compared to doing top singles. But the singles might be more specific to getting better at the singles, or doing even doing
100%.
3 sets of 3. So if we're comparing like 2 approaches for strength, because there's nuance between that as well. Obviously, one that's a little bit shifted in the higher direction is going to be superior for mass all day, So a 3x5 is going to be better than a 3x3 or 3 sets of 1 at 90%. No question about it.
Yeah. And see, we talk about this. We go back to the roots because these are obvious things, but it's always dangerous to approach things like this because I'm certain that we just said that, and our people are going to think, okay, this means that bodybuilding is only high reps. So for now, I'm only going to do only high reps. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that you can do low reps. I have certain lifts where
Yeah.
I do 3-4 reps. Why? Because I want to push progression. Because you want to train for strength, you have to get really good at doing low reps.
Yeah.
But it's something you can utilize to then push progression to get more reps on other lifts. Across the board, it's what both bodybuilders and powerlifters do. Powerlifters do hypertrophy blocks. They're going to do more reps. Why? What is the goal? Bigger muscles? No. To get a stronger 1 rep max. For us, it's the opposite.
Yeah, and on the point of hypertrophy blocks, I want to ask you this. Because it was funny in your video, like, yeah, why are you doing hypertrophy blocks? Your training is hypertrophy. So then on that point, I want to know, how do you overcome plateaus? Because we know that, it's going to take time to build our strength, and that process is slow, right? So maybe it's not actually a plateau, but assuming it was, how would you, you know, prevent yourself from stagnating?
Well, first off, you just said something interesting. If it's even a plateau,
Yeah.
right? Because what is a plateau? A plateau is your strength is not going up anymore. Okay, that is a tragedy to a powerlifter or someone who cares about strength because the one value that you care about is not moving. But for a bodybuilder, it's one metric of progression that is stagnating. Okay, I'm going to look at the rest of the program. Is the rest of the program stagnating? If the answer is no, I'm good. If my
Okay.
bench, let's say I do my strength hook for normal style bench and I'm plateauing, but my close grip bench, my push up, all of the other things that I do for chest are all going up. I'm not going to freak. It's still going up. So it's a plateau from one lift, not for the muscle.
Okay. Interesting. You know, that's fascinating because a lot of strength athletes would look at it the other way around. Okay. They would say, if my bench is going up, but let's say my tricep extensions aren't, that's fine. You know, but you're saying like my bench could be whatever, it could be the same, but if all the accessories are going up, then because something in the program is improving, then the net effect is progression.
Yeah. And you can also expect and bet on the fact that at some point that bench is going to go up because all of the other lifts that involve the chest are going up. So at
Yeah.
some point, the plateau is going to break itself. What wouldn't work, however, is to freak out and strip the rest of the program, which a lot of
Yeah.
people who train for size do, where they're going to hyper focus on performance and think, okay, this plateau means I'm not progressing in muscle mass. So I need to put all of my eggs in that one basket. And I'll talk to a powerlifter who will tell them, oh, all of what you do for the rest of the program, all of these tricep extensions that's taking away from your performance, take it out. Now they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, that's a good way to detrain yourself, and it's one of the pitfalls of some of these peaking programs. I've never been a fan of that for hypertrophy, and that's what I like also about my style of training. A lot of people talk trash about conjugate or concurrent, but I think for if we're going to compare a strength program for bodybuilding's sake, I think that's the best one since you keep your volume high all the time. So then, in your case, like, do you actually do anything, or you just wait? Like, real talk, man.
It's a good question because again, I used to be that guy that when I plateaued, I freaked out. And I was like, I need to break this. I would be in a slump. I would feel bad about myself, as we all do, because we look at that as the one metric that needs to go up. Nowadays, my approach is this. I look at my tonnage and I look at what's going up. If there are certain things that are not going up and they're not a priority, I don't care. So for example, chest right now, even if I stagnated entirely, I wouldn't care because my
Okay.
chest is where I want it to be. So that's one thing where I'm just going to shrug my shoulders. On the other hand, I want my long head of the tricep to be bigger. I look at my long head of the tricep hook. It's going up right now, so it's all good. If it plateaued, now I would pay attention because now it means that I have a problem with my hypertrophy.
Okay.
There's something going on. I'm not recovering because the muscle is not strengthening itself, so there's an issue.
So how would you go about, like, let's say the long head of your triceps, you're not getting stronger at your overhead extensions. Would you do it through exercise rotation?
Rotation is one thing that I do, and what I do with rotation and something that I preach is the rotations are always in the program. So the what I call dormant, meaning that I have a day where I have like 7 lines of sets, and you would think he's going to do all of that. No, of course not. I'll do 2 or 3 lines of these sets. The other 4 are there in reserve. If one day I need to come in and I'm like, okay, that long head needs work now because it hasn't been worked in 2 or 3 days, I have an exercise in one of the line of sets that contains long head of the tricep. So it's going to be shifted in for something else, and I'm going to get it done today. My program is built so that every muscle that needs to be worked can get worked at any given time, because every 2 days is either an upper or lower, and every upper contains every muscle of the upper body and every lower contains every muscle of the lower body and more, because the two also intertwine. It's what I call a gentleman split.
Yeah.
It's the absolute amount of freedom and flexibility available to people who know how to auto-regulate, because for someone who doesn't, it might be very confusing, but once you're in tune with your body and your training, in my opinion, for bodybuilding, it's the way to go.
Well, so now that you mentioned the gentleman split, I actually wanted to ask you what exactly that was for the people who don't know, because a lot of people have talked trash about splits, saying that doesn't work for natural bodybuilders, and you're saying, "How? No, man, there's a gentleman's way of doing it." So what exactly does that entail?
So we've been on YouTube Fitness for a while. We both know that bro
Oh
splits
yeah.
were prevalent back when I got started. It was all you could have. You wanted a training program from a bodybuilder? There is your bro split. Train your triceps once a week and train your legs once a week and hope to become Ronnie Coleman. Of course, it doesn't work because bro splits, and I'll say that on your channel for the record, are
Okay.
the worst bodybuilding template on earth. It is terrible. You would be better off doing starting strength and just bulking like a madman. You would get better results in terms of aesthetics. It's 100% true. The existence of bro split is an insult to intelligent programming. And there is a reason why it came from bodybuilding, because proper programming was mainly a gift from strength. It's something that I said also. It's just that the issue is that because strength and powerlifting in particular taught so much to bodybuilders, we now just copy their way and you don't try to do something new. The
Exactly.
gentleman split is that something new. I'm trying to take what was turned into an abomination of nature, which is the bro split, and make it relevant again, because not all muscle part split is a bro split. A bro split is a type
The
of body
type
part
split.
split.
Yeah.
It's one that is done poorly because it doesn't understand the way muscle works synergistically, the way you're supposed to actually program effectively. So I took that and I turned it into what I believe to be a good method, a good template. So the way I think about it for a gentleman split is you're going to approach it as upper lower. So the skeleton template is an upper lower, but it's not strict. Meaning that just because it's an upper doesn't mean that you cannot train calves. It's just that the majority of the muscles need
Hmm.
to be upper. It's that way you have a guidance, and it's not just a free for all, because that's when bad programming starts. After
Yeah.
you have that down, you have the skeleton of the gentleman split. What you're going to do is you're going to use the muscles, not the lifts, the muscles of the body, and you're going to program around that. So for a day, you can come in and say, I want to train chest, triceps, and shoulders. Okay, these are synergistic muscles because they work together when you do compound movements. What lifts can I implement to have all of these covered up? And just like that, it becomes really easy. It's actually a very natural process. When it becomes a problem is when you try to isolate and say, oh, I just want to work chest. That's impossible because any movement that only trains chest tend to be isolation based, and that
Yeah,
leads down the rabbit hole of poor bodybuilding practices that we've seen in the
exactly.
past.
So then in terms of exercise selection, you're thinking about the muscles, but usually that's going to incorporate a classic movement pattern. So if we're just talking about the chest, that's obviously going to hit your shoulders and triceps as well, unless you're just doing chest flies and training like all these gearheads, right? So are there a certain amount, like for me, I do it with horizontal and vertical push pull, as simple as that. And then I'll do an accessory in a muscle context for the muscles that those compound movements hit. So, and that depends on my weaknesses too, right? So I might do like a face pull and a tricep push down, but I won't do a chest fly because my chest is not lagging. So how do you work in the exercise selection?
Well, once you start there and you have your upper lower base, and you think of it as, I want to train X and Y muscles, then you have to logically follow up by picking lifts that hit those muscles. And that naturally leads you down to compound movements. It's the
Right.
reason why also I want to make sure that bodybuilders understand compound movements are not powerlifting movements. They are movements.
They're
Anyone
compound
can
movements.
use them.
Yeah.
Powerlifters use it because it involves a lot of muscles, prime movers, and it's the maximum expression of strength for that movement pattern. We want the same thing. We want the maximum amount of stimulus for that movement pattern for the muscles. So we're going to use those lifts, your deadlifts, your squats, your bench presses, your vertical presses, your chin-ups. All of that is great. It is the heart of the gentleman split because it's what's going to be the bread and butter. Most of your tonnage will come from compound movements.
100%. So then how many compound movements are you typically going to do in a session?
It depends on the day. So, for example, if on that day I want to train shoulder and chest, that dictates that I need at least one horizontal press and one vertical press. That is what is
Right.
going to make the most sense, give me the most tonnage for these areas of the body. So that's at least two. And that is for a simple gentleman split because you could throw in upper back as well. So now we're going to add chin ups. So that's three heavy compound movements. There's no limited number. I always make sure to not give like hard rules and regulations because I see that many people tend to then follow them to the letter and it doesn't allow them to learn. You have to make your own mistakes when you program. It's going to be okay. And you know that too. If you add an extra compound movements are so tonnage heavy that
Yeah.
if you mess up your recovery, one is enough to make it so that the entire program is going to be difficult in terms of going from one day to the other. When that
100%.
happens, take it out. You'll see compound movements will punish you if you don't allow the body to recover. Isolation is not like this, but for the compounds, that's the way I think about it.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is in any extreme direction, you'll have guys that are full on compound, but they'll do too many of them. They'll do like 4 different presses in the workout. And then you'll have the guys who maybe do one compound, but then 3 isolations. So there's always some weird like extreme, right? And what I found is you probably like you still have to train the compounds hard, but likely not to the same volume that you think. And for me, I found that if I do 2 presses in a workout, that's more than enough. And I've tried everything. I've done 3, I've done 4. I always go back to 2, you know? And even with the back, there's this belief that you got to do double your rowing volume compared to your presses. But I think a lot of people are starting to realize that you don't have to do this. And if you are, guaranteed they're going to be lower quality sets. So you're going to be doing like prehab type stuff, like band rows. And it's not really anything that stresses you for hypertrophy. It's just getting blood flow and it's mobility, and it's not bad to do, but certainly being married to a certain amount, you got to do this exact number of sets. There's a lot of nuance, and I think like even when you look at the evidence, they're saying you need 10 to 20 sets a week per body part, but there's no one that can say exactly where you need in that range. It's always like, okay, play around, figure it out, but it's not 20 is automatically better than 12 for every individual.
And 20 is really is like up there in
It's a
terms of
lot.
range. And the issue with that type of study too is that it doesn't tell you the intensity of the set, Like, what are we talking about? Is this quality tonnage? Is this junk volume? Where are the sets? Are there, do I have 10 sets on one day and 10 sets on the other, or 5, 5, 5, 5 on 4 days? These give different results. That's the reason why people need to keep that in mind as well. It's not just about doing the sets. It's about the quality of the sets and when they happen. It's what's so terrible about bro splits. A bro split will tell you, okay, train your chest, all right? People will think I have one day of the week where I train my chest, so I need to do as much as possible. And I'll do 4 presses. But by the time you're to your third press, you have no strength left. You're
Yeah.
just, en français, on dit, tu brasses de l'air. There's nothing much happening. It's not challenging enough. It's not relevant. Those 2 sets would have been taken and done 5 days later for better results.
Yeah. So when you're training your chest and back, do you like to split it up or superset them? Because a lot of people will do bench, then immediately no rest, barbell row. Then they'll do overhead press, then weighted pull up.
That's really good. The gentleman split is a non-stop superset fest. It's like
Gotcha.
giant set of the wazoo. You never really take a break. The only portion of the program where I allow people to take rest is the strength hook, for especially squat and deadlift, because I want them to be fully focused and to fully
Gotcha.
refocus. But if they have a knee flexion or a hip hinge that follows up, that is not technically part of the strength hook, that is just volume, quote unquote, they are going to superset that. You're going to do something
Yeah.
else afterwards, because there is absolutely no point in doing something like a barbell curl and then waiting 3 minutes on your ass. Like, the only muscle you worked is your bicep. You could have done a superset for triceps, forearms, calves, whatever.
Yeah, I've even seen the extreme point where guys will train their biceps on leg days, you know? Because they got the extra recovery and they're not doing anything. So okay, let's curl, you know? And in general, you don't have to superset everything, but there's something that could be thrown in. And one thing, I recently uploaded a lower body leg workout, and I showed sissy squats and reverse hypers. One thing I didn't mention in that video is that I actually supersetted them because there are two opposing areas. When you're doing a sissy squat with your hips extended like that, it's all quad. So it has no relevance in affecting your reverse hyper, like literally none. So why am I gonna like just sit around when I can go back and forth, which naturally equates to rest time? Because a lot of people complain about living in the gym. Oh, this workout takes too long. Oh, these compound movements, it's so much work. But then you look at their program and they're making it harder on themselves for no reason. Like, one thing I've been guilty of is doing my presses first, followed by my back work in a non-supersetted fashion. I'll be the first to admit that takes extra time and you don't have to do that. But someone who supersets push pull, like, they're going to be out of the gym in no time and they're getting adequate rest for their muscles because these are antagonist supersets.
And more people need to understand that, because a lot of people tend to believe, as you said, that if you're in motion or doing any movement at all, then it technically doesn't count as rest, but it does.
It
You do
does.
curls, then you do triceps. The biceps are rested as you do your triceps, so then you can just go back and forth between those two. It's again a mindset that is too focused on performance. Performance is important, but you will find that most supersets you do, even some that you might think are actually fatiguing, are actually not even touching you. For example, bench press and then Skullcrushers. If you do Skullcrushers strictly for the long head of the tricep, with almost no lockout and no involvement of the lateral head of the tricep, you can do the test at home yourself. You'll find out that you don't lose performance on the bench.
Interesting. So then, do you like the classic bodybuilder superset? Close grip bench to failure, and you follow it up with extensions?
That's great. What I like to do is Skullcrushers, the opposite. I do Skullcrushers and then I do presses.
Ah,
Close
so
grip
like a
bench,
pre-exhaust.
not even a pre-exhaust, because I don't think that it exhausts anything. You only got the tricep, then you bring the bar up and you just do close grip bench. It is going to be, at the end of the day, two different muscle groups. One is just pure long head, the other one is triceps and chest and shoulders.
That's interesting, man. So like you're not approaching it from the perspective that like you're making it so hyper focused on the long head that your lateral head is literally fine,
Yeah.
as opposed to treating it from a constant tension standpoint. It's really like there's a bit of nuance here.
Or even a compound standpoint, because I remember posting videos of me doing Skullcrushers and people in the comments not getting it. Like they were seeing someone from a different planet, and they thought it was improper form, but it's because they themselves do Skullcrushers like a compound. I'm sure you've seen people do that, where they use the shoulder joint and they bring it all the way back, and then with the shoulder joint they bring it all the way up. It's almost a pullover in a sense. It's
Right.
not wrong, but it's just that you turned an isolation into a compound, so you cannot expect to get the same results for the long head. The way to get the long head is you bring the shoulder joint back, so in full flexion, and then in that position from here, you extend. That works the long head. If you do this, or even here, if you bring it here, that's long head as well, but it's also a lot of presses. It's different goals for different people. But all of that boils down to, again, understanding what works certain muscles. And it becomes really tough to program based on muscles if you don't understand what lifts hits what.
I think that's very important to distinguish. You need to know what exactly you're getting out of the lift, and no exercise is inherently bad. It's just about biasing the muscle emphasis. And that's the fundamental difference between regular strength training and bodybuilding training. We can modify the movements drastically to get more of a localized effect. And it was once thought that this was impossible. You can't hit the long head more. Because the triceps all across the elbow joint, just get stronger and everything's going to hypertrophy equally. But we now know that's a lie. There's been tons of research that came out that shows, yeah, you can preferentially target the long head. And it doesn't even have to be with overhead movements, by the way. It could just be lining up your cables when you do tricep pushdowns, such that you get more elbow flare. So you're bringing your arms back like in a kickback, and that's going to hit it more. So if we know that we can emphasize, like we can shift the focus to certain muscles, then these variations are good. And I think that's where having an understanding of biomechanics is important. So I was actually curious, what are your thoughts? Now, obviously, we do a lot of time-tested training. Most of our stuff is like on the fundamental compounds, barbell movements. What are your thoughts on this new wave of optimal exercises that's
Yeah.
trending on Instagram and TikTok and all that? But some of it is actually sound. Like assuming like it's a good movement, it's not gimmicky. What are your thoughts on that?
First, you have to look at who's promoting it. Right? It's not
Okay.
even the question of the what, it's a question of the who. Is the person someone who's natural? Are they someone who are trustworthy? And what do they gain in pushing that? If anything sketchy comes up when you answer these questions, most of the time you can just ditch the lift. It's going to be garbage. Then you have people who came up with a way of lifting that is going to preferentially target a certain muscle. And when that happens, it's very possible that they actually found something interesting, like a gem, that is going to allow you to, again, give more tonnage to that area in particular with a specific style. And once that happens, you try it yourself. You might find out that it's garbage, that it doesn't work for you, or that it's painful or whatever. Or you might find out that it's the greatest thing on earth. Because at the end of the day, it sort of blows the mind that some people would have even uttered the thought that it's not possible to target specific muscle heads. When you think about the reason why muscles exist to provide function. How many functions do the human body have? An infinity of it. So it would make sense that each function in particular would then target a specific muscle. It's reverse engineering. That's what bodybuilding does. Powerlifters look at muscle and they think, okay, if I develop that muscle, I'm going to increase that function. Bodybuilders do the opposite. If I increase that function, I'm going to grow that muscle. So any type of approach that is going to look at the function and find a way to hack it and to make it to utilize properly is going to result in something that can be interesting.
There was a popular fitness YouTuber back in the day who was talking trash about bodybuilders, and I think he still does to this day. Actually, he does. And what he claimed is that bodybuilders view the human body as a stack of Legos. I don't know if you've heard that quote before.
I have heard that quote, Alex.
Yeah.
I am quite familiar.
But what was then seen as an insult, honestly, that's a pretty brilliant quote. Now that I think
Yes,
about it, like, yeah, we're
very
fucking Legos,
perspective
man.
very perspective on the part of this individual. He was correct, but he just didn't
Yeah.
understand that what he was saying was actually a pearl of wisdom. You need to think about your body as a stack of Legos. You just have to understand one thing. The Legos are interconnected. Some of them are going to actually work one with another, and they're all piled up on the body. The body has one recovery, right? But each Lego in itself recovers at a different rate. So on
Yeah.
Monday, you can work on one part. So one Lego is going to get worked on Monday, and it's going to need until Wednesday or Thursday to recover. Doesn't mean that another part of the body can get hit on Tuesday.
Yeah, especially since there's a lot of overlap. Like I posted like 2 upper body workouts recently, and one of them there wasn't any overhead press. And people were confused. They're like, yo, how come your frequency for all the movement patterns aren't equal? And it's like it doesn't have to be.
I think the Lego metaphor is actually a great one for people. It's just that it would become a problem if people try to approach it as trying to only work one stack at a time. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that you have 25 Legos in your body and that each exercise needs to target one. If anything, we say the opposite. Compounds are great because they are going to cover a large portion of the body. So 1/3 of the stack of Lego is taken care of right there and then, right?
Yeah. So then going back to this topic on biomechanics, have you found any of these movements to be beneficial in your training? Do you program them at all? Are you familiar with some of what's being promoted? Like what, because like what is your general, like is your training 90% barbell based? What does it look like?
Well, for me, it's mainly compounds, as I said. So the barbell is at the center and the core of the program, but it's because it's my bias. It's still
Right.
in the sense that powerlifting DNA in me. It's just that I,
It's hard to
I,
undo.
well, it's not even just that. Is that I enjoy the movements. They work for me,
Yeah.
and I've never gotten really injured with them as long as I train properly. So I do bench, squat, and deadlift just like a powerlifter would do. I just do it for a different reason. But I keep telling people that you don't have to. These are just means to an end. If you wanted to do dips, zercher squats, and block pulls or good mornings,
Hmm.
you're still working those Legos. Those muscles are still getting
Yeah,
hit.
yeah.
The barbell is not the sole movement, the sole implement that is going to allow for growth. It's just that it's one of the best because it's very convenient.
Yeah. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? It's just a great tool that even with myself, I don't see a reason to deviate away from it. And I feel like a lot of people figure that out by getting a home gym because the barbell is really all they had. Or if they had dumbbells, maybe it was limited in the load. They can only go up to like 80 pounds or something. So they're like, okay, let's just do this barbell and see what happens to my physique. And after a few months or years, they're like, yo, this works. And the progress never stopped. So they don't have to change anything. And when you already have results, it makes you question all the stuff that's being promoted today. It's like, okay, nice to see. The variation is fun, but do I actually need it? And I think that most would find just by buying a home gym now, really basic, they would see that this is actually the case.
People need to understand that the progress that we see on Instagram of these new lifts, they're new because you've never seen them. It doesn't mean that they're anything special or that they constitute an evolution. If anything, usually these lifts are us going back in time or doing things that are less effective for the shock value of it. Because again, it's going to be something that people have never seen. It's something that marketing practices tend to preach. You have to shock the viewers. A barbell is pretty much the epitome of evolution for lifting implements. We moved slowly from just picking up rocks to then free wells or kettlebells to dumbbells to then barbells. It's not like it's an antique piece of equipment. If anything,
Sure.
people need to understand that when they use a barbell, you're using like the top of the technology available for us.
Yeah, and I think what's important to know is that the barbells are made differently today. We're not back then it was the axle clean and press and the bars were welded with like those round weights at the end. That's what look at those old school pictures, right? It's not what people are doing today. And like now we got different types of knurlings, different flexes on the bar. When you hold a quality bar in your hand, you feel the difference. Like I have the West Side Power Bar 2.0. That shit does not compare to a cat barbell, like a $150 bar. Even with that, there's differences in quality, and it gets pretty complex. You got a lot of different formulations. Some bars are over $1,000.
Yeah, and it's once you have that bar, you can do so much with it. Right? It opens up horizons. It becomes an issue when people only do barbell movements because they're limiting themselves. What limits them is not the barbell. The barbell is not forcing you to only use it for bench squat and deadlift.
Yeah,
You can do so much stuff with barbell. You can do isolation movements
of
with a
course.
barbell. You can do whatever you want. At the end of the day, you have to look at it as a tool. What do you want to build with the tool? If I put a hammer in your hand or in the hand of someone else, you're going to build something entirely different. You're going to use different functions of the hammer. Does it mean that the hammer dictated that? No, you did.
Yes. And I think that the more, like, I love the big three and I love the big five, which includes the OHB and barbell row. But let's keep it real. There's a lot more than 5 barbell exercises. And if you are going to stick to just those, for example, okay, why not mix in some weighted calisthenics? It doesn't have to be a straight bar. You know, some movements are very comparable in terms of intensity, but obviously we got that emphasis. So like 70% of a program can be barbell focused, and then an extra 30% you go hard on something else, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And that's in terms of tonnage, not in terms of raw exercises. That's also important to keep in mind. Because any barbell movement, you're going to move a tremendous amount of weight. It cannot
Yeah.
compare with isolation. So that's what I tell most people. Most of the volume will come from barbell movements, but don't neglect the rest because the rest might be all the difference. It's the issue with people who are going to tell you that the big five is all you need. I have seen people like this. There's a plethora of these guys on YouTube Fitness. But the issue is that if you look at the lifts, logically, and then you correlate that to muscles, there are so many muscles that get ignored,
Yeah.
right? So you do your chin-ups, your rows, your squats, your deadlifts, your overhead press, your bench. All right, where is your long head of the tricep hook? Where is your forearm isolation? Where is your neck hook? Where is your calf hook? Where is your stretching movement for the hamstring? Where is your movement for the lower back if you have lower back problems? Where is your trap
True.
isolation? Where is your ability to not be limited by the legs on horizontal rows? All of that are things that people need to think about if they want to bodybuild.
Yeah, it goes back to minimalist versus maximized programming. And I think one of the biggest issues that people have is they assume that barbell training is minimalist. And that's been propagated by novice programs that don't feature accessory work.
Yeah. And the minimalism part is important as well. I made a video about minimalism, and my thumbnail was a barbell. For a
Huh,
reason, is because people have turned the barbell into a minimalist implement when it was never supposed to be that. Give a barbell to a strongman, especially a circus strongman, and see what he does with it. The
true.
minimalism is out of the window. He's going to do a million lifts with the stuff.
You're right. And that's where being creative comes into play. And heck, you can even put a bar in the landmine station, and now you have a completely different strength curve. So it's not just a barbell row, you can do a T-bar row, but the bar is still the gateway to doing other stuff. And then what else could you can attach stuff to the barbell as well. Like you can use a daisy chain with gymnastic rings attached to the end of it, and now when you do your T-bar rows, you're getting more range of motion, you know? Or you could use your barbell to do pull-ups off them. Or better yet, if you have a Swiss bar, you could put that on top of your rack, and now you get access to the neutral grip stuff, which you otherwise would not have had access to. Or you could freaking anchor your bar flat and now do Nordic leg curls. So it's all limited to the imagination of a person, not the implement itself. And that goes for anything.
Yeah. The strength of a sword is not the sword itself, it's the person that wields it.
There you go. So, do you do any of these fun new exercises?
No, I don't. I don't. I actually stick mostly to the basics, and I stick to stuff that works. Because for me, if the team is winning, don't change coaches, right? I do
Gotcha.
movements that have been working for years and years. I'm not going to switch them out just for the heck of it.
Yeah. Like I follow some of these guys for what they have to say, and some of it is actually on point. I'm not gonna lie. But one of the quotes that, let's say, Coach Kasim says, this is very important. Hype will make a lift popular, but it won't keep it relevant in the long term if it doesn't get results. So basically, the lift has to prove itself. It needs to have a time-tested history, and barbells have already done that. We know for an absolute fact you can get massively jacked and strong. Nobody is not going to get big from using a barbell. But with some of these movements that influencers like to feature, See if they're still popular in 3 to 4 years from now. If they're not, then you know it was never worth it to begin with. But if people are still talking about it, maybe there's a little something to it, you know? Or if it's like 50-50 popularity, perhaps there's some degree of truth. But even then, it probably doesn't compare to what people have been doing way back. So I think that's where we can draw inferences. And you can be the tester yourself and say, okay, fine, I'm going to spend 2 years doing this stuff. Or you could be like, you know what? I'm going to stick to my barbells, let these other guys do it. And if it works, then maybe I'll give it a shot once it has some momentum.
That's a testimony to our times, I believe, because when you look at hype, I don't know the guy that you just cited, but he is absolutely on point, on the money. The amount of influence that hype has on the mentality of people is mind-boggling, where they will think that something is the next big thing since Jesus Christ, and then 2 months later you ask them about it and they forgot.
Yeah.
Right? You were all about it, and it was your entire life in existence, and now you don't even know what it is anymore. The good thing with all of these lifts, the squat, the bench, the deadlift, is that people have been doing them for a century, and we're still doing it. Either as a species we're idiots and we do something that doesn't work, or maybe they prove themselves and now we can just stop with the constant reinventing of the wheel of people who say, oh, bench press is actually a terrible lift, do single plate bench press instead. No, your stuff is full of hype. In 2 months no one will know your name, so just let the basics be the basics and leave the classics alone.
I 100% agree with, man. So I want to ask you, since we're on this topic of the basics, what are some home gym essentials that everyone should get? And why do you love working out at home so much instead of the commercial gym?
So for the essentials, what I tell people to get, for the people who have like almost no money and no space, the number one thing you're going to want to get is a pull-up station. And you would
Pull-up
want to
station.
get one of these that have like the dip bars attached to it. Because believe it or not, they tend to be cheaper if you know where to get them. They're easier to assemble and disassemble. They're easier to sell. And you don't need to fix them anywhere. You don't need to put them on a door frame. You don't need to actually bolt them on the floor because they're square enough that they're balanced. So that is a great way to start. With that, you can do your horizontal presses with the dips and you can do your vertical pulls. So that's already a good start. After that, you can start thinking about weights. The issue with a barbell is that a barbell doesn't come with actual plates. So it's a
Yeah.
big investment to make. And a barbell by itself without a rack is very limited. Just like without a bench, what are you going to do? Deadlifts? You still can find inventive ways to get stuff done, but it's not the best. So what I would say for the next one would be a pair of dumbbells and a bench press. With that, you can already move on to the next level. You can cover your horizontal presses as well. You can do some standing vertical presses. You can do some rows. You can do some squats. You can do some deadlifts. That is going to help a lot of people get started. Then resistance band. Believe it or not, it is almost always a bad idea to get a cable machine if you're a home gym owner. It's a big investment. They're tough to move and to reassemble, and they're tough to sell. So what you want instead is replace that with the resistance band. You can do triceps with the bands, long elbow triceps, biceps. You can do shrugs with the band. You can do good mornings with the band. It's only going to be limited to the amount of imagination you have. If you have these three things, it's low budget and you've covered most of your bases.
You know, I appreciate you for being honest about these things, because what you just did was bring it back to the average person. Straight up. You did not put your biases, did not inject them into this recommendation. You thought of saving space with that tower thing, which is basically just vertical. It doesn't
Yeah.
protrude out that much, and it's a stable implement, and you can get really strong with weighted dips and weighted pull-ups, not just barbell row and bench press, just to say. And then the dumbbells, you can do everything with that. You can do seated OHB, you can do your flat presses, you can do dumbbell rows. There's nothing you can't do. And for the average person who has, let's say, like 80-pound adjustable dumbbells, they can get to a respectable physique. Then maybe after that point, they could start adding stuff, or they could do higher reps, or better yet, with those bands you just recommended, you can actually put it behind your back when you do dumbbell presses, and now you have some accommodating resistance. So you can progressively overload with that, and you don't need the cable station. You just put on top of that pull-up bar and go to work. So that's pretty cool. But I'm guessing the next step would just be you get a power rack and a bar and some plates. But obviously that's a massive investment.
That's an investment, and it's It's money-wise, of course, always something you have to keep in mind, because not everyone has that type of money to just be spending on something that's a hobby for most of us. And on top of that, it's space, right? It takes a lot of space, and you have to build around it, right? These are things that once you bolt down a rack, for example, it's going to be a tough go to actually undo what you just did. The barbells are going to take space as well, the plates as well,
Yeah.
so you'll need a bigger local. But I do believe that at some point, if you want to progress further and you're serious about this, making that investment with quality equipment is probably one of the best purchases you can make.
Yeah, if you want to get that next level. Maybe some people, they're going to alternate between the home gym and the regular gym. So maybe twice a week they're just doing dumbbell only workouts. Maybe there's that other day where they want to use some heavy bars. Like I know in my case, I used to go to the gym just for trap bar deads and to do reverse hypers and even the cable machine because I didn't want to buy that here. It would take up a lot of space, right? So you can always blend a bit. Have like enough essentials to get the work done with a bit of supplemental stuff that's always available to you at some local gym.
Yeah. And once that is done, you are going to also find out that it might not even be for you. There's a reason
Yeah,
why it's best not to spend a ton of cash on a home gym at first,
right.
because a lot of people crave the social aspect of the gym, and they're going to find out that training by themselves is not motivating to them.
Mhm. I think how you're wired individually makes a difference and what your past experience was. Like for me, I started with calisthenics in a small little room, you know, right next to my bed. I would do push-ups and everything, a doorway, pull-up mount, and I did everything like that for years. So a long time after, when I got the home gym, it was like, okay, I'm a teenager again. That's what this feels like, and it wasn't an issue. But you know what? I don't have a living room anymore. It's a gym. That's what that room became. So you got to ask how important is this to you because the shit adds up. You know, not only in terms of spending money, you're gonna spend thousands if you want proper stuff, but the space, it's a lot basically. And by starting small, you'll know if you actually love this enough to go to that next step.
Yeah. And most people also find out after some point that, yeah, if you're going to turn an entire room of your house into that gym environment, it better be for something. Because if not, well, I mean, that's a lot of space. And if you have people who live with you, they might not actually appreciate that. So
That
it's a
too.
question to ask. Then you have the apartment. If you live in an apartment, you can't really drop weights or it could damage the floor. All of that is to be taken into account.
It's true. On the topic of bands, actually, what are some of your favorite exercises that you like to do with them?
Well, what I usually tend to do with them is it's either stuff to quote unquote pre-fatigue certain areas of the body that then I hit with compounds. So for example, the chest. What I love to do is when I warm up for my bench press, I take that band, I stick it underneath my feet, and then I just do just
Ah,
cable flies like this, right? So it's technically a standing band fly, and you can find that you can actually quite recruit the upper chest and feel it contract with it. It's not much mechanical tension at all. It's not going to result in massive gains, but it's still something you can take, right? I do like close to 100 per push session. That adds up after a while.
wow. And you know,
But
man, sorry to cut you off, but that's enhancing your injury prevention too, because you're getting a lot of blood flow there through a full range of motion, and you're getting the shortened position. So I think that's actually benefiting you in the long term, even if it doesn't help you get bigger necessarily.
well, the reason why I started doing that is because I got a pec injury. And I had
Oh,
not necessarily a tear, but a sprain in my upper chest. So I started being much more careful with the way I warm up. And I started doing that. And before I knew it, it was a retro. I don't even think about it. But now it's like a prehab, a rehab, and nucleus overload.
ah, that's freaking awesome, man. So actually, have you ever done nucleus overload before? Full
I
on?
do it, oh, yeah. I do it nonstop in my training.
Nice. And what have your results been like?
Well, I actually have had pretty tremendous results with it, meaning that it's actually one of the first topics I covered on the channel. I made a 3-part series on nucleus overload to make people understand what it meant. Because when you bring up that type of thing, especially when you give it a name like this,
Yeah, it's
nucleus
a
overload,
fucking name.
people are like, okay, it's some magical hocus pocus black like practice that
Yeah.
is just made up. No, it's not made up. It's just that the name is sensationalized. It's supposed to sound cool to try to get you to do it. And I'm going to be honest with you, Alex. I don't care about the science attached to it. Like all of
Okay.
the nuclei cell of that, the satellite cell, keep that in the science room to people who want to play with all of that. It's great if that's what you enjoy. All I know is this: if you do high reps for low intensity for a movement and you do it frequently throughout the week, even though technically it's not relevant because it doesn't constitute your main work, it still results in growth. And where I insist on, and what I've seen in terms of change for me, was pullovers. I do between 40 to 65, 70 reps of pullovers per push session with around 60 pounds. And I can tell you that the difference it made in my lats and in my torso has been incredible.
That's amazing, especially since you have some people saying that the pullover is not even the best movement, that it has a lot of deficiencies in the strength curve itself. But just you going at it frequently with enough volume, it adds up. And that's another thing that people don't get. Like, a movement doesn't have to be optimal necessarily. Just do it for long enough and see what happens. It's the addition, even greasing the groove. You're doing basic push-ups and pull-ups at home, but that workload adds up to something great. And next thing you know, your pecs and back are looking a little bit better. I think Omar Isuf was one of the first who did a 10,000 pull-up challenge in a year, and his back just got so much wider. So it's also raising your work capacity, not to mention it's active recovery in some type of way.
Because at the end of the day, work is work, right? We talk about optimization, and people confuse that with that's the only thing you must do. No, of course, doing a 3x5 or an evolving rep range on chin-ups with weight is better than just doing the same amount of reps with no weight. But if you can get both and your recovery is on point, you're still getting work done. So even if it's technically junk volume is only bad if it replaces quality volume, or if it takes away from the recovery from the quality volume. If it doesn't, it's just additional work. So it results in additional growth.
You're right. I suppose it has to follow two rules. One, it can't cause overuse injuries. And two, affect your main work. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a simple. See, it's the secret of like lifting that people have been questioning for years and years. The answer is always simple at the end of the day.
Honestly, everything we're talking about today is simple. People would think it's complicated because, wow, these guys are talking for like 3 hours and they're providing all these details. But when you actually like listen to each segment individually, it's like, oh, yeah, this isn't all that hard to grasp.
Yeah, and the beauty of it, and I encourage anyone who actually made it that far in the video, first off, congratulations. Two, you will come to understand that things that sound complex to your brain are easy to understand for your body. Once you do it, it makes a ton of sense right off the bat. So don't over focus on the concepts, focus on the application, get it done, and make it your own.
Yeah, man. And that's why also being in the trenches is so important, because that's when you can start to formalize a concept. I remember years ago, I read an article of a guy saying, don't study your ass off on a subject right off the bat and then attempt to do what you just read on. First, try it, even if you know fuck all about it. And then once you have a little bit of experience, read, and you'll be able to draw meaningful comparisons. But if you have no reference to work off, you're going to forget it all. And you won't actually know how to apply it in a meaningful way because you never did anything.
Yeah, practice should always be number one. And it makes total sense because the creation of theory followed the application of practice. A guy who is going to write a book that thick about chest training started with basic stuff and he built up that knowledge. You get all of that knowledge dumped into your lap and you start with it. What are the chances it's going to work? Zero. An example I have for that is editing. When I started making videos, I had no knowledge or understanding of editing at all. But I didn't start by looking up tutorials. I just opened up the thing and I did shitty videos with it. And from that, I learned. After that, I could research theory, but the practice was the most important part.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you more questions about that, but it is off topic. But screw it. Do you see yourself ever?
Yeah.
You ever see yourself going like crazy mode with the editing, where you got a bunch of B-roll, you got a really nice DSLR, and you got the lights? Like, how far do you see yourself evolving the quality of your videos besides the talking?
So I have a pretty Neanderthal approach to stuff like this, meaning that when it comes to lifting videos and the bulk of my channel, I always want to keep it uncut and unedited. I just want it to be like one long ass video that people can just sit through. I'm going to structure it. I'm going to do a good job, but you won't see crazy edits because at the end of the day, to me, it just is, in a sense, it's the cherry on top. But if the cake is good enough without it, I don't see the point, and it's also not my style. And also do believe that for a lot of people, it takes away from their content because they start to shift more towards production value, and they stop paying attention to what they're actually providing to people.
Yeah,
You
you're
see
right.
that with especially nowadays with the modern wood, where the companies put all of their efforts and money into the packaging, but then the product is subpar.
You're 100% right, man. And just looking at my own experiences, some of my favorite videos I've made, I had no editing at all. It was just me talking for a long time, raw, unscripted, just letting everything be out. And you know what? There's a lot of gems in those segments, and it's the same for you. Sure, like a 3-hour video might be long, but I guarantee that anybody who watches something like that is gonna learn some things.
What I believe is this: if the video is an hour, it should be impossible to take out 10 minutes without destroying the video. Because if I can't do that, it means you're rambling, or it
You're
means you're
right.
repeating yourself. That is valid. When I hear people say, oh, that video is too long because you repeat yourself, that's cool, that's true. But if it's just that there's too much information in the video and people are not willing to sit through it, now that's a different topic altogether. Because the question is, are you even really in it for the information? The top of YouTube fitness and all of these big influencers, what they offer is a spectacle. You're like watching a show. It's like a movie, but you're not learning anything from it. And I challenge anyone who actually follows these channels to do a simple test. Take a piece of paper and at the end of the video, write down what you learned. You will find that
Oh,
the page will stay blank. Watch one video from Alex or Geoffrey or Bold Omniman and then do the same thing. You're going to cover that page.
damn. That's crazy, but you know, I'm envisioning this in my head. I'm thinking of a novice lifter watching one of these videos and having to rewatch it, you know, and being all puzzled, like, oh yeah, what did I learn? Because they
Yeah.
actually didn't. They liked what they saw because it was so fast paced, but nothing was absorbed. But you know, I call this action faking. I didn't coin this. I learned it from MJ DeMarco, and he says that it's people who they think they're being productive and doing something that's helping them reach their goals, not only in terms of knowledge accumulation, but fake actions. And when you watch, let's say, a 4-minute video, which is not a bad duration, but let's say it's 4 minutes without any substance, it's just fast edits, just really good, and you're able to sit through to the end of it. If it lacked information, you're still going to think that you did something productive. It kind of tricks your brain because you sat through 4 minutes. But if there wasn't any substance in there, then you're just fooling yourself.
Yeah, and this is actually a philosophical concept that's prevalent nowadays. This action faking stuff, because in the fitness realm, I can cite you a number of things that people do that they think is helping them, but actually is taking them away from work. For example, buying programs. You wouldn't believe how prevalent that is, but people buy programs and they take out satisfaction from that fact, or they think, okay, I've done something for my lifting
Just off
journey.
buying it.
Just of buying it is the reason why of the people who promote their stuff know that. They know that bias. They know that they provide satisfaction with their products without even having the need to have the guy trained for anything. So that's one. I also want to cite people who watch other people train. Now, when you make a video about training, it's not just you filming yourself. You explain everything. So there is information received by the lifty. They know why you do things and they can copy it for their benefit. But all of the time, look at these vlogs. Look at all of these influencers. They explain nothing. The only thing you do is you watch them train. What does that do? It satisfies the itch for training, because I guarantee you a lot of people, they have that fire of motivation inside, but
Yeah.
they spend it on someone else.
So they're basically, it's like watching a motivational video. It just goes to show that it's montage mode, not information overload. And that's the distinction.
If what they're seeking is motivation, then it's acceptable as long as they spend it, right? If you get motivated, but that's the mean to an end, to no end, because you don't train afterwards, then it's a problem. I know people like this who just watch motivation video all day and they get all hyped up in their chair, but they never train. Now it's a perverted way to consume that type of content. But the issue is that it's almost impossible to recognize that as long as you train yourself. And it's true that a lot of people are going to gravitate towards that. A lot of people are not going to want to listen to information, or if they do, it's going to have to be very short and condensed. And I think that this mostly comes from the fact that these people underestimate themselves. They think they don't have the ability to listen to all of that, or they're too
Mm.
dumb. I have many people who tell me, hey, your videos are too long, like it's too complicated. I don't believe that for a second. I think that they think that's the case, so they limit their own intellect. They don't give themselves the chance to actually access it, and therefore, sadly, they never progress. And I'm segueing into something that we wanted to talk about, but it's the same for philosophy. Philosophy is accessible to 100% of humans, but it's now become a niche topic with apparently only the elite of intellectuals who can access it. That's not true.
It's true. And it all depends who's explaining it as well. You know, like one thing got to give credit for is Bald Omni Man. He tries to refrain from using big terms. He'll call it galaxy brain or giga brain. He tries to, like, he'll explain what those things are, but then he'll provide a simpler alternative so that people can understand both elements and realize that, oh yeah, this isn't all that complicated. So if you show a drawing and the different arm paths that can bias different parts of the upper back, that simplifies things. Instead of saying like, oh, if you have this amount of arm adduction in the lengthened position, like people don't know what the fuck that is. So if you provide both perspectives, you explain it clearly, and you just you give the person a chance to listen. Like actually, they don't just click off after 2 seconds. You would find that most of them actually understand it. So I think if enough people start to produce enough informative content, the new sentiment will be, yeah, we can learn this. This isn't all that difficult. And it's not.
It's not. Exercise science is not a tough field. We're not talking about quantum mechanics here. And even quantum mechanics is accessible to people who want to learn it. It's just, it depends, as you say, on the willingness of the influencer to make it approachable, which some of them don't want that. They like to
Mm.
remain obscure because it sounds cool. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I work in tech, and I can tell you that it's insufferable to talk to people who work in tech because they use all of these terms that only mean something for their job. But why do they
Mm.
use it outside of it? Because it sounds cool. It's like their own secret clique. I've seen that with programming too, where a lot of people promote programming in a fashion that makes it look inaccessible, only reserved to an elite. That's not true. 100% of people can program, and we can always find a way to dumb it down without taking away the substance.
Yeah, but you know what? You mentioning that, it just made me realize something. Maybe in some cases, it's intentional to overcomplicate it. Because what it does is makes the person seem more intelligent and the viewer being less worthy comparison wise. And so the next step is to invest in online coaching or buy this program that solves all the guesswork for you because you can't learn it yourself.
Yes, Alex, that is exactly that. You could make a beautiful influencer if you just wanted to sell your soul because you already have down to pat. It's a
Oh,
method that
fuck.
exists times and times again. I made a video recently about that where there was a specific guy who was giving all of these things to follow to become a better man and be more alpha and more masculine, but they made either no sense, were completely unpractical, or unreachable for the average person. And then he said, oh, if you can't do that, no worries. I have supplements that replicate all of that. So just buy
Ah.
my overpriced supplements. They create a need, then they tell you that if you cannot fulfill it, then you're going to miss out, and then they give you a way to pay for it.
You know, we can apply this to any field, but it's always the same garbage. And like all the time, it's create the problem, sell the solution.
Yeah, it's the way this wood works. Most people, they spend money on stuff they don't need, but someone told them they needed it. Most people, like if you give me your budget list, I can strip down 30% because most of the time it's people who just spend stuff on garbage that on top of not being useful weights them down.
Yeah. Even when people online, like fitness influencers, sell programs, why don't you consume all their free stuff first? If you still can't learn it, then fine, invest, right? But there's a lot of good information that you can learn from. And maybe just by doing that, spending a few hours digesting everything, you're going to be good. You won't need to go that extra step. Not that it's bad to support those you like, but give yourself a bit of time. Like, trust yourself. Trust that you can learn this shit before going down the paid route. And you know what? If you pay for it, by that point, you'll be able to connect the dots because now you got the reference of their free stuff.
Yeah, and understand also that most people who want to help you will make it so that their knowledge is accessible without a paywall. You, Bold Omni-Man, Geoffrey, yeah, you sell stuff, but anyone who has the ability or the willingness can just go on the channel and get the same benefit or close to it for free. So there's no obligation to buy. But it boils down to, again, what we became as people. Maybe if that is a topic that interests the subscribers of your channel, we can dive deeper into that. But the consumerism has infected YouTube fitness, yes, but it's everywhere, of course. I remember I personally grew up in a place where people didn't have much money, and I had a neighbor who constantly bought stuff with her credit card, even though she couldn't pay it back. And I remember being 6 years old and understanding that what she was doing was a problem because she was putting herself in a financial hole and trying as a kid to discuss it with her and seeing that she didn't understand it. She thought that she was entitled to consuming things without realizing that the reason why she was poor was because of that.
Exactly. So actually, I do want to touch upon that a bit more. I know that when I was growing up, video games actually taught me how to save. I don't know if you experienced a similar thing, but you grind for all your resources, and there was no pay to win back then. So you invested your time, and you knew that if you were to expend all your in-game money, that you wouldn't be able to, engage in other activities, or your armor would be subpar. Like, I don't know if it's the culture change or people, but I feel like maybe our time you learn to save more. I don't know.
I think that with the current situation, it truly speaks to the fact that most people don't project themselves, not necessarily because they don't have the ability to, but because they don't even think that it's going to be a possibility, right? It's the no future mindset, where if you don't think there is going to be a tomorrow, why would you save up? There's no
Mm,
point, right? You should just expend everything. What if there is a war and your bank account is emptied because now it has no meaning anymore? It was always just a numerical number on a digital bank.
mm.
That is the situation we're dealing with nowadays. And sadly, as you say, it's also a result of the time. Actually, there are studies that have shown that the ability to save up, but also to refuse instant gratification for later benefits was correlated with intelligence in children. So what they
Oh,
did is they gave them one candy and they told them, hey, if you don't eat this in 10 minutes, I'll give you 10. So
oh
I'll multiply
yes.
your candies by 10. And 9 out of 10 kids just ate it because they were like, well, I want the candy now. And the ones that didn't tended to test better for cognitive tests and intelligence. And what you point out with video games is very true. Video games, it used to be that you had to scroll money away and then you would buy that big piece of equipment or maybe a house or like a mount. If you didn't have the discipline to do that, you would never get better. So it was like a replica of real life. It was important to be able to just conserve your power and spend it at the right time.
It was teaching you how to work. And I remember hearing that study. Yeah, thanks for mentioning it. But this also leads on to discussion of instant gratification in the lifting community. And what we can extrapolate from this is that people do this with steroids. It's always, I want it now. I can't wait any longer. So that's the death of our society, to be honest with you. Instead of just embracing patience, having the right virtues, and staying on course.
Yeah, because if you always expect a payoff for everything you do in life, you're always going to do a certain type of things, the things that are pleasurable. But the issue is that you quickly find out that what gives you pleasure with no work tends to be poison in the long run, because anything that is actually valuable takes time and patience. It's the same for lifting. The best natural physiques are built throughout years and years of efforts, not 6 months of blasting whatever sounds or substance you can put your hands on. But the issue is that it's extremely hard to teach that to people, especially teenagers, because between some guy like you and I, who preach discipline and patience and slow results, and someone who is going to sell them that dream of becoming big in 6 months, we can't compete with that on the same level.
True. But in the end, we're preaching the correct message, and eventually everyone comes to this conclusion that it's not worth it. Because eventually these people are going to have to get off the steroids and they're going to realize how much of an effect it actually had on their physique, and they would have already destroyed their health in the process or taken a few years off their life. And I've seen some comments over the years of guys in their 60s. They're like, yeah, when I was in my 20s, I took a bunch of shit. And honestly, if I can go back, I wouldn't have done it. So that's why even some of the responsible enhanced influencers will say, yeah, wait till you're at least 30 years old, or wait till your brain is fully developed, which takes at least 25. So anyone, obviously for you and I, we're going to discourage it completely. Never get on that stuff. But wait till you have a bit more life experience, and maybe you'll realize that, yeah, you don't need that much muscle in the first place. Just embrace long-term discipline, and you're going to be a lot happier in the long term. Not only physically, because you got the body you wanted, it just took some time, but also there'll be no regrets. Because 9 out of 10 times, people do regret their decision. You know, losing 5 years off their life, maybe even 10 in some cases, if they go to IFBB pro status. And for
More,
what?
more than that. 10 years is generous, Alex. 10 years, you would be well off. Like, if you went pro and you still died in your 70s or 80s, you're good. Most of them are going to die earlier than that. We're going to see that more and more. And the issue is that, as you say, most of the guys who die young started taking drugs before they were 25.
Yeah.
Actually, if most people followed your advice and we could make sure that no one before the age of 25 took PEDs, I think we would reduce the amount of people who take it 60, 65%
Yeah,
at
at least
least.
50%, easy.
Because it's most people who take that drug do it out of an impulsion. They do it because they can't wait anymore. They want the results now. It's not a sound decision. I see too many people trying to paint it as, oh, every person who does drugs has years of research. They're going to do their blood test. They're going to take everything into account. That's nonsense. I couldn't tell you the amount of people I know personally who did a debol cycle only, where they just swallowed pills. How many? I don't know. They didn't know either. They just swallow like 3, 4 in the morning. And if you told them, hey, that's liver toxic, right? They'll be like, what? What is liver toxicity? They didn't even know.
Actually, one thing that I found out recently through your channel and a debate that was going on is that people are going on SARM's websites and they're able to get that. So imagine being a teenager living in the modern age and you just want to go on that at 16, 17. So I think it doesn't help that it's becoming easier to do. And it's also, in my opinion, irresponsible that people even talk about how to do a cycle right, in my opinion, because you're giving them the keys to doing that. Their counter argument will be, well, if they're going to do it anyway, I might as well be the one that provides the proper guidance. But it's like they don't understand that some people wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for the information. If someone really has to go down that route of getting illegal drugs, let them go to the forums. Let them go back to where they started. But of course, what I'm saying right now would probably be considered controversial in 2022.
Yeah, and to that point, I have found that what now is controversial used to be common sense, but we've moved away from it. And with drugs, it's the same thing. It blows my mind the amount of people who think that just normalizing drugs and making it more open and something that is more widely accessible and available is the good choice, as if it was going to make things better. The only thing it does is it allows people to jump on the boat easier. I know that it's scary to think of the dark days of PDUs where they had to go through like a guide, the black market. They didn't know what they were taking. It was all very underground, but it was for a reason. It was underground. It was not in the public eye, and the amount of people doing drugs back then were much lesser than now. Compare drug use in the 80s to now. I'm guaranteeing you that it was multiplied by 10. Dudes back in the days would look at pro bodybuilders, they would think, oh, they're huge, but they would have no access to the drugs. Nowadays, the drugs are very easy to find with a simple Google search.
And what I found also is that if they did get on the drugs, they were usually older guys, past 25 years old. When I say older, it wasn't 17-year-olds for the most part. So that's the difference. I feel like the people who are going to be the most impulsive are the younger audiences. Those are the guys that are going to get on the SARMs and whatever the hell they're selling these days.
And to it's something that I've said in the past, and I know that it pisses some people off, but teenagers need to understand that because it really is the best thing you can hear at your age. Teenagers are stupid, right? If you're 17, 18, you're not at the point where your brain is fully developed. You will be much smarter in a few years. And that's a good thing, right? It's a great thing to be able to tell yourself that in 2 years, I will be smarter. You're evolving. But of course, when you're 15, 16, you think you know everything, right? You're extremely arrogant. We were all like this. The issue is that it's fine to be arrogant, but if it leads you to taking drugs that have long-term side effects, now it's a tragedy.
Yeah, especially if you're not going to get off, and it's going to create a whole host of other problems with body dysmorphia. Because one thing that I've heard in the steroid community is that once you become enhanced, you'll never be natty again because it's addicting. So that's the danger in all this. Even if they say planned on getting off, like, oh, I'm going to just do a few cycles, it usually leads to a lot more than that. And now, in their prime years, where they didn't even need that to begin with, they could have built a great physique, they're now dependent on these drugs. And that's a really sad reality. And it's why you see all these guys that are your age, my age, getting on TRT. And that is fucked. I'm not going to address this topic that much longer because I feel like we did a good job last time and even today. So instead, I want to dive into what we were supposed to talk about last time, which is Stoicism and the lifting community.
This was supposed to be the introduction to this video.
It was supposed to be an introduction, but I was like, you know what? Let's end off with that. So that's going to be the final topic. It might be quick, it might be long. I have no idea. Let's just get right into it. So the whole philosophy is centered around not worrying about things you can't control. How does that apply to natural bodybuilding?
I think that most people who lift and who are serious about this will end up realizing that they have developed stoic traits without having to read any books.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that stoicism that was built up by these men who wrote all of these books came after their own experience of nature. So it's, in a sense, it's like the connection that we have with the old school bodybuilders. We are going to have similar experiences and similar training because we're both men, right? We might live in different times, but the experience is going to be similar in an aspect or the other. And I think it's interesting to see that the precepts that would make your life better 2,000 years ago are still relevant nowadays. They still apply. And one of them is this: stop looking at things you can't control or you have no actual power over, and don't worry about them so much, because at the end of the day, the only thing you're doing is you're wasting time and valuable energy. And you find out also that for lifting in particular, this means that things like your genetics, or the fact that you might not get the result that you want as fast as you want, or things are not falling into play, but it looks like it's out of your control. You're correct, it's out of your control. So stop worrying about that. Worry about the things you control: your training, your diet, your sleep. Once you recenter on the self and what you can do, all of the problems of life go away.
Exactly. It goes back to what you just said about genetics. People want to know all the specifics of how they were born, every little factor, when in reality, even if they were to know, it doesn't change anything, because you're still going to have to train, optimize your program, and stay committed in the long run. So whether you're gifted or not, the only variable that's going to change is results in a given time frame and your potential. But everyone's potential, even though it's different, can still be reached. And that's why it's cool to know certain traits about yourself. Like, oh yeah, I got Spartan ancestry. I got some warrior DNA in me. That is badass. And you can honor your ancestors and you can follow some of their teachings to elevate yourself. But at the end of the day, if you weren't blessed in some respects, maybe height is one of them. Maybe your leverages for a certain lift. You got these super long arms, so when you bench press, you can't lift quite as heavy. Maybe just your response to training. You're what some people would define as a hard gainer, which in my opinion is usually mislabeled, but I digress. If you know you're not like that genetic elite. You're not a freak. What is the impact of that? Because the way I see it, as long as your mindset is right, you're applying what you need to succeed, then it's all relative. And that's all it's ever been. So stop worrying about things that came way before you, because it doesn't change a single thing in the end, unless you allow it to. And if you allow it to, then it was a negative change that didn't have to be there to begin with.
Yeah, it's self-created, because again, it's all relative. People obsess over potential. But what is potential? Like, potential is bottom to ceiling. That's your potential. What does it matter? Most people will never even come close to that ceiling, but they will never even start because they've been told that the ceiling is here. Well,
Yeah.
Big deal. You don't even know if it's here because you're never actually going to try it. You need to actually give it a shot. Again, if we go back to the ancestors, pretty sure that our ancestors weren't complaining about their genetics. This is something that we started doing. And I see people saying that it's because we have advanced in terms of science. That is a telltale sign of people who believe that we are so much smarter than the men of the past. That's not the case. There was more wisdom in the grand toe, in the little toe of your grandpappy than there is in your entire body. I think that sadly, many people nowadays don't understand that. Back then, men acted. Being a man was something that you did. People didn't even think about it twice. No one discussed about like masculinity and how to be
It's
an
true.
alpha. They just naturally knew what to do. Because we are so disconnected with it, we are the ones who have to theorize all of that stuff to be able to reconnect with it. And
It's
it goes
true.
back to self-gratification for the genetic potential, as you said. I feel like most people, they want to know exactly what they can achieve before they start. And if you tell them that they're not going to get a super elite level, then they won't even start in the first place. But that's the behavior of a spoiled child.
You're right. It's someone who is rejecting stoicism, basically. And what will happen is if they just got rid of all the theory aspects, all the mental masturbation, and did what they had to do for a long period of time, they would get so far that maybe even their initial expectations would be surpassed. And I know this is exactly what happened to me because you couldn't have told the teenage Alexander that he was going to bench 405. I didn't think it was possible. I realized it was a possibility when I was already muscular. I was in the 300s and I was like, yo, my progress isn't stopping. I'm doing pretty good. So I just kept at it. And then I started researching what the old school bodybuilders did. And they had a 4-plate bench. And I was like, okay, these old school guys who didn't have access to all the information we have now, but probably understood certain training concepts, like you just said, they didn't verbalize it, but they understood it. These guys were able to do it. And I'm getting closer to that point, even though I didn't think I was going to get to that point. That's pretty cool. And then you start realizing that, oh shit, I naturally became a stoic or adopted those traits. I did not even have to learn about the subject. I learned about it years later. And that's when you draw connections to your experiences and you can really like identify with it. But the point is, to get to that level, you just got to stop thinking in general about where you're going to end up.
And just do it. Just get it done. It's something I tell people all the time. They tell me, hey, if I train for 2 years, what am I going to look like? The answer is, I don't know. Just do it. See what it does. It's something that is correlated with Schrodinger's genetics because
Mm-hmm.
it's the truth that most people don't even realize they got muscular. You will wake up one day and you'll be like, wow, I've gotten to that point. And when you get to that point, you look back and think that the previous you was almost incapable of understanding your true potential. Same for me. You show a picture of me right now to my younger self. One, I wouldn't even be able to recognize myself, and two, I would say, well, that's a manga character. Like that's not real life, and yet there we are.
And it's always crazy when you look at before and after transformations, side by side, similar lighting, same pose, and you look like a completely different human being. It's like, what the fuck? You can't even wrap your head around the idea that you become the picture on the right. It's so different. Like even the frame, you can have a guy with a narrow frame, but you get his delts wide enough, you build up his lats, you just get him muscular, and it's like, did he have a big frame to begin with? Actually, I think it was 2016. I started saying that my frame had gotten bigger. I was making that statement. And I guess that was based off the fact that my rib cage protrudes a lot. But really, when I analyze my body, I don't actually have a big frame, which should be evident by my height. But just to say, it looks like I do. And that's because I put on a lot of muscle and it took years to get to this point. It years later, it's almost like you think you have good genetics now. It's the
Yeah,
Schrodinger's genetics. It flips the script. But you
it's
won't get to
it's
that point unless you just stay in the moment, just commit to the process.
it's the power of muscle building. We talk about genetics all the time. It's possible to state that one can actually change and impact their genetics. Why? Well, because again, you will grow into a completely different caliber of human being. And I think that lifting truly is the key when it comes to that, meaning that I know people in my friend group who are like 28 and they look the same they looked at 18. Like they have the same face, they have the same way their body moves. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm certain that there are two puberties in the life of a man. There's the hormonal one via the chemicals of your body, and then there's the one you're going to earn. If you go back in time, look at men, look at the way they looked. No, they weren't bodybuilded, but there was a frame and structure to most men. They
Yeah.
were physically capable. We are at the age and the era of men who look 12 in their 30s, and that's not acceptable.
They got no muscle. They don't look tough. They just look weak and frail. And I think that lifting actually changes the wrinkles on your face. That's a bit of bro science on my part. But when you're making all these faces, the grunts, you get a lifter's face. You're
That's
not gonna have the same look as a guy who never picked up anything in his life.
that's so interesting that you say that, because if you look back at things that were considered masculine, scars were seen as masculine. Why? It's the sign that you went through battle, that you experienced stuff. A scar was very attractive to women. They would actually seek men with a lot of scars. What you describe is sort of the same thing. It's markers of struggle. You go through things that make your body tougher. Muscle is this. The reason why muscle is so biologically attractive is because it's not necessarily just the aesthetic appeal to it. It's deeper than that. It's the sign that you're a hard worker, you're disciplined, you're dedicated, you can take care of yourself and therefore others. All of these are immediately evident to the eyes of anyone who actually looks at you. But then on the flip side, if you look like a kid or a complete twerp, all of that goes out the window. And it's sad because it's most people nowadays. The majority of humans are like that.
Yeah, and it also depends where you are too. Like I think in your videos you said that France was the worst,
Oh yeah.
that you never seen so many wimps before.
It's a wimpy country, and I know that I have a ton of French viewers. They know that I am my heart is French. I have a French flag. It's my nation, c'est ma patrie. But what my country has become and the caliber of men I see, I said that in a video. When I go out in Paris, I look like an ogre. I'm not
My
kidding you.
God.
I'm twice the size of the average guy, and it's not just height. I'm taller than the average French person, but it's literally that their legs are the size of my arm. They're so
Yeah.
small. And I'm thinking to myself, you don't have a disease. That's not a condition. You got that way because of your own design. There is a problem. Just to end with this anecdote, one time I had a mom call the cops on me because I was scaring her. She had a kid with her, and I was just standing there in the shop. But because I was too big, apparently, I think that she thought I was up to no good, and it made me realize, wow, you haven't seen a burly big guy for so long
That's how
that now
long it's been.
your first reaction is fear.
That's crazy. So it's like, and it makes you wonder, like, who's your husband?
Yeah, who
Does
is
he
the
look like these
guy?
people? Like, fuck.
Yeah, who is the guy that if someone knocks down your door is supposed to protect you? Because if he's built like you, well, I hope you have a dog, because the kid is not going to fight and protect its own life.
Wow. But yeah, I think there is something primal when you see someone with muscles, and it just goes to show, like, their work ethic and the confidence, because you will change when you embark serious lifting. You won't be the same person. And to me, it's kind of the evolution of, this term gets thrown a lot, but what's it called? Um, Not gymlet, um, gym cell.
Yeah.
So you might start off as a gym cell, but then it becomes a lot more than that. That's just the starting point. You eventually become an individual that you're muscular, you take care of your health, but it's not the only thing you do. You're using it as a tool to enhance your life, become the best version of you. Because strength, like we talked about at the beginning, it's not a weakness, and there's a mind-body connection. And just, it feels good to have muscles.
You quickly realize that, yeah, we get into the game for muscles. Everyone does. And maybe even for girls. Many young adolescents lift for girls. But maturity is being able to realize that you never actually lifted for girls in the first place. You lifted for yourself to feel better so that you could approach girls. The byproduct of that is immense confidence. Trust me, between a guy who has insane amounts of confidence and a guy who doesn't, even if they have the same body, women are always going to go towards the guy with confidence, and people in general, people who are like well balanced and who have, in a sense, a proper view of life, will regard you as someone trustworthy that they can count on. The opposite, usually the swore shaming, comes from people who are going to look at that and resent it because they don't have it. And so, in a sense, out of anger, out of jealousy as well, they're going to attack.
Exactly. So then, what are your thoughts on people who say that the pursuit of bodybuilding is feminine?
Excellent. See, you fire me up with questions, things that I think about all the time, because sometimes someone says something and it's so stupid that your reasoning skills are staggered or stunned
Mhm.
by the anger for a second, where you
Exactly.
think, I cannot believe I'm breathing the same oxygen as this idiot. And this is one of these things. Like, lifting is feminine, building your muscles is feminine. Okay, let's observe this logically. Why would that make sense? Well, the guy who said that is because he's going to tell you that you're vain and that women are vain, so therefore you're like a woman. First off, sexist much. Secondly, it's interesting because go back in time and tell that to the ancient Greeks who spent hours training their body, and then they wrote the best books on Stoicism and philosophy
True.
afterward. And they would tell you that if they weren't so physical, they would never be able to produce that philosophy. Stoicism is the philosophy of strong men produced for and by strong men. And that's pretty much that, yeah.
I believe Socrates had a test for allowing his students to partake. He would fast them for a few days or a week or some amount because he had to make sure that you were physically able to tolerate a certain degree of pain, that you had temperament. And even when you look at the Greek statues, one of the things that people laugh about is the small dicks, right? But that was on purpose. It was to calm down the fiery energy. So it's like the opposite that they're showing there. So a lot of these philosophers were actually muscular. They had good physiques. They were brolic in a sense. They were brutes, but also smart. And I think that's what we got to get back to in the modern age. We're not just stereotypical gym douchebags. We're buff and intelligent, and we're
Yeah.
gonna uplift everybody together.
And it's the way men should be. I know that a lot of people, when you talk about masculinity, they think, oh, you just want everyone to have big biceps and like behave like apes. No, it's quite the opposite. I think that you can civilize the soul by taming the body, and it's something that goes hand in hand. The people that I meet that have this hyper focus on the cerebral cortex and developing the intelligence and who shun the physique tend to not be that intelligent or advanced because they have lost sight of an important part of who they are. And a lot of the time, these are the same types who are going to then tell you that what you do is feminine. It has nothing to do with you. They feel better about not doing it themselves if they can actually categorize it as something that is bad. And the worst part of it all is that at the end of the day, that's what women want, right? That apparently feminine practice of developing the body, yeah, these are markers of attractiveness in the eyes of women. Women don't want a guy who is not going to be able to protect themselves. They don't want a guy who doesn't stand up for themselves. That, at the end of the day, is only true if they seek a friend. If they seek someone to just chat with, they will pick someone that looks and behaves like them. But if they look for a mate, they look for an opposite. Just like you and I. If we're going to pick a girl, are you going to pick a girl who grunts and who presses two plates and who does everything like you do? No, because it's not balanced. You want someone who is going to complement you. They're going to complement that with the feminine. But if you don't have the masculine to bring into the balance, then nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, it's the masculine feminine polarity, and there's always going to be someone in a relationship that has a bit more fiery energy, you could say,
Yeah, or
to
even
put it
just call
nicely.
it what it is. Call it
Call it what it
masculine
is.
energy.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong about that. I know that what is wrong is to categorically say that this is masculine, this is feminine. No, there
Right.
is some flexibility. Some men have some feminine traits. There's no shame in that. But you will find that for the word to actually go around, you need most men to be masculine and most women to be feminine. Only because it comes naturally to us. And expecting us to be 50-50 of both and to become these gray creatures with no features, that's unrealistic and it's cruel because it doesn't make people happy. We talked about that. Masculine archetypes exist in our brains biologically. When we see them, something happens, but we were always going to gravitate towards these practices. Culture only reinforces it. And when we live in a culture that shuns it, that makes it impossible for us to be masculine, it creates sadness in men.
Yeah, and it creates men who are afraid to speak out because they're going to be judged, for just being themselves. Uh, and this is especially common in little boys from what I'm seeing now. There's a lot that can go on with that, but what would you define as fake masculinity, especially in the fitness community?
So it's great that you use the term fake masculinity, because many people nowadays, when they discuss the topic, they like to talk about toxic masculinity. It's something that I don't like, because the term in itself is poisoned. A lot of people who talk about that pretend that they're picking aspects of masculinity that are bad, and they're only focusing on that. But you quickly find out that what they hate is masculinity in total. They want to throw the entire thing in the garbage. I say that masculinity is neither good nor bad. It's what you make of it that is going to then
Mm-hmm.
be important or interesting. So the whole of masculinity needs to be conserved, because things like aggressivity, for example, or strength, you could use all of these to dominate people and hurt people. You can also use them to protect. And guess what? If you remove the strength to protect, then the people who have the strength to dominate will run rampant. And it's an entire discussion around the topic of virtue as well. But you quickly find out that the men that are going to allow themselves to be subjugated by that type of talk and renounce their masculinity are the good ones. They're the ones who already listen when you tell them to do things. The bad guys who are going to use their strength to hurt you will ignore it. They will still be armed with masculinity, whereas the defenders, the shield of men who would have protected the wood and the environment from these bad guys, quote unquote, don't exist anymore. And it's something we see more and more nowadays. And it's something we see in the fitness sphere. A ton of the masculinity we see is not actually benefiting to either men nor women. It has one purpose, and it's usually to sell products to men who are lacking in masculinity.
Right. So it's basically it's neither good or bad. It's just that's what it is.
And it's a simple fact to accept, and one that many people would agree with if you pointed out, for example, that you never hear anyone talk about toxic femininity. But the feminine essence has toxic traits to it. Do we talk about removing them? No, not really. Why? Because it's not the enemy, apparently. The enemy is man. It's the masculine energy in all of us. I think that the people who truly are gunning and hunting masculinity are, one, misguided, two, don't understand that they're going to remove what is protecting them, and three, should be better off spending that energy attacking the real culprits, because there's a ton of people who sense that masculinity is under attack. They sense that we must restore it. But what they do instead is they just interject their products or their own benefits into the mix, so they don't help masculinity. They make it worse. They make it more toxic, quote unquote. And it's a never ending momentum too, because those same guys are going to motivate people to be even more anti-masculine. A ton of guys are going to follow them and become fake men as well, promote these values, and masculinity as a whole is dying.
It's a vicious, endless cycle. So then, NH, how would one combat a lot of the, let's say, propaganda of this negative form of masculinity, and how can we reclaim our throne in this?
Well, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have to be able to decipher between people who just want your money and the rest. That is something that can be taught, it's just logic. But look at the guy and tell yourself, okay, what is the benefit he's gaining from teaching me how to be a real man? For example, if you had a good solid father, he would do that for one reason. You're his son. He wants you
Exactly.
to prevail. He wants you to pass on your genes. So that's what he's going to do. What does a guy like Liver King, for example, do? Is he really trying to improve your life? No. Take one quick look at the dude. It's never been about that. It's always been about fame and his own benefit. Masculinity has never been about this. It's never been about
Hmm.
me, me, me. Masculinity is about sharing and making the world a better place as a whole. So that's one way to do it.
So it's
But
altruistic,
paradoxically,
basically.
it's masculinity is altruism. It truly comes from that. Someone who is kind is someone who possesses enough masculine strength to be able to expend some of it, even if he's not going to get any benefit. And that leads paradoxically to the self, right? Once you recenter on yourself and you build yourself up and you stop looking at the world around you, you'll get to a point where you will reach an answer for yourself. And once you have that answer, you can share it with people. But too many men nowadays look for masculinity outside of themselves, and they live like this. It's good to have models, to have male power fantasies and archetypes to learn from, but it needs to then be reconnected with you.
You got to manifest what's always been inside of you. And I think Megan of Team 3D Alpha has been preaching that for a long time. It's like we all got that king that needs to be awakened. You know, there's a term for that too that I can't think of at the moment, but we're all capable of greatness if we allow it to happen.
Yeah, and it ties back to also the fact that many people believe that greatness is external or it's something only gifted to a few. You see that with the built different meme, as if there were men selected at birth, born to be talented or to be better than anyone else. That is not true. Some people have more skill at birth, more potential at birth, but at the end of the day, we all have the ability to again become a king, to become our own best self. And a lot of people have forgotten that. And because they've forgotten that, they look around them for idols and for icons that represent that, but they never actually make it themselves.
I think it goes back to accountability and not making excuses. And that's the whole thing about Stoicism that we just talked about. I think that after watching this video, people probably have a different perspective now of masculinity and how lifting really impacts their brain, because there's a lot of benefits. And in general, we got to just reclaim our throne.
Yeah, and it's both going to be on a spiritual and physical level. But at the end of the day, as the Stoics would say, stop discussing what it means to be a good man, just be one.
Just be
Just
one.
get
Yeah.
it done. Make sure that you're not being misled by people who are not looking for your best interest, and start getting to work. Because at the end of the day, what we need is, we don't need one guy who's dominant and the king of the wood. We need everyone to be supreme. We need everyone to get to that top level because it benefits the entire community.
There you go. It goes back to what we talked about last time and what we're constantly witnessing right before our eyes in the natural community, which is beautiful. And I'm so proud of everybody. And I just love how everything's going. So let's all keep it up. Let's all become kings together instead of like having this big ego attached to it and saying, oh, I'm better than you. It's never been about being better. It's just you're being and you're representing and you inspire one another to do better individually.
Yeah. And what you see us do, again, as individuals, you can do yourself. And at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. It's the reason why we're on the platform. If it was just about showing off, then we wouldn't have had the impact that we have had. And that's all the difference.
Yeah. And wouldn't have lasted either, because that's what's going to keep you in the game long term. It's not just about showing off. So then, NH, I think we pretty much covered it all. Training, lifestyle, you name it. I would like to ask, are there any final messages that you have for my audience here today regarding any topic?
Well, first off, with a thank from me. Thank you so much for all of the people who actually work to get my channel back. This is what I'm talking about. When you give to the community, it gives back. There is that loyalty and there is that connection that even a big enterprise and company like YouTube wasn't able to sever. And I hope that it truly encourages and it motivates you all. Because realize one thing, we have been able to create a structure that has been able to stand up to a power that many people would have said is absolutely impossible to surmount. So thank you so much for that. And then to closure this video again, it's great to discuss, it's great to talk, do your research, read books, develop yourself intellectually, but at the end of the day, understand one thing. You are going to become the man that you need to become for yourself first, and then it's going to benefit others. Start from the self and then expand.
Fantastic. Love the message, and thank you again for being here with me today. Loved our discussion, and I have no doubt that is going to help out a lot of people. So let me know, guys, if you want a part 3, and that's it.